All right, Trails Collective World, thank you for being with us for this week's edition of TC Live. This is the episode airing March 16th, 2022, or whenever you might be catching it after the fact. It is streaming live on my own personal Facebook page, as well as the Trails Collective Facebook page and the Trails Collective YouTube site. If you are tuning in and want to drop any comments or questions into the feed tonight, go over to the Trails Collective, either Facebook or YouTube channels, and drop the comments there, and we will try to catch them and chime in on those. Or if you just want to comment with any others in the feed, feel free to do so. And yeah, so let's get into it. It should be a full episode, as always, tonight. I don't hesitate to go long or necessarily clip it if it feels like we can dig in with some people. And we have a full episode tonight if everybody is able to make it on. What we have in the lineup, if the people actually end up making it on, we have I'll do an intro here in a minute, and then we'll see if an acquaintance, Steve Malin, is going to give a plug for running for the Ukraine fundraiser that he's got coming up, doing one of my events, the Highland Trail race coming up here in May. And then Ashley Gresock here outside of Ithaca is with a few friends launching hopefully another Trail Sisters chapter. So if they're able to log on, I will bring them through and they can plug each of their events for a couple minutes. And then we are going to dig in a little bit to Barkley. I guess at this point, I think it was a week and a half ago, if my bearings are correct. And I am grateful to pick off some of the time, hopefully, of Alyssa Godesky, Chris Roberts, and Michael Dubova, all who went down there with the grand visions of what can be, but knowing that Barkley has a tendency to eat its young, as they say. It did just that. So it'll be fun to dig into all of their experiences. Incredibly tough, if I don't say as well, talented individuals in our Beast Coast region, and it'll be good to just dig in a bit there. All right, so let's get into it. So let's see what happened. Northeast trail scene still fairly quiet coming out of winter. I don't think there's a ton happening on the FKT field. We had a few people join us as supporters on the Patreon front for the Trails Collective. So for those of you who don't already know, you can find your way over to the Trails Collective Patreon page and join us as a Patreon supporter. Every little bit helps, and we will do what we can to turn it back into supporting athletes and media covering trail running in our region. So thanks this week to good friend, longtime friend, Jim Lampman, as well as Chung, both New York trail and ultra individuals. Jim always focused on how many hundreds he can do in the year. To a certain extent, he's got his favorites. And then Clement, I think, focused this year on many on the Jenny and Twisted Branch. So to both of you, thank you for coming on and for your support. Events that ran this past weekend, there were, I think, just a couple, at least that were on my radar. Fire on the Rocks 10K in Meckelhattan, PA, put on by the PA Trail Dogs crew. It was a battle for the win with Brock Ryder pulling it out in 1:10:33, just 17 seconds ahead of second. And for the women, John and Lucas for the win in 1:17. I think it was a good snow year. We got a decent amount of snow. I think it was like on Friday. So I think it made for a fun course. And then the SAS Squad crew put on the single squash 5.5 and 11 in Mahwah, New Jersey. Benjamin Collier and Alexander Finn Atkins for the men's and women's wins. And then on the media front, let's see, Jay and Phil with the Pain Cave went live with their coach, both coached by David Roach. I was able to just catch that or listen to it today in the shop. And it was a nice interview. For David, who you don't know, is a pretty outstanding runner and coach. Actually, I should say he and his wife. It was just David on the episode, but Megan, a phenomenal runner and coach as well. So head over to the Pain Cave if you want to check that out. All right. So, Ashley, you're tuning in. I see you there. I'm about to bring you in.
Hi.
Ashley, thanks for being on. How's it going?
Hey, good.
As well as your trail partner.
Yeah, multiple trail partners here I have in the background, some dogs. But I just wanted to let all the local Ithaca ladies know that we are starting a Trail Sisters chapter here. My friend Nicole and I, we are doing our first event this Sunday to celebrate the first day of spring, which I think we're all very excited about here. It's at 9 o'clock. We're going to do a group run starting by the Children's Garden and probably just do an out and back on the Black Diamond. it's definitely, everyone welcome, all speeds, all distance. I'm sure this will be a very more meet and greet first meetup, but it should be fun. You can follow us on Instagram for more at Trail Sisters Ithaca, and then you can also look us up on the Trail Sisters website.
Cool. And for those who aren't already familiar with Trail Sisters, what's Trail Sisters all about? I mean, you kind of glean it from the title, but tell us about Trail Sisters real quick.
Yeah, it's a nationwide group that was started to sort of work on getting more women into trail running and also hiking as well. They do a lot to support females getting out and involved in trails and running.
Right on. And what, in terms of chapters, so Ashley is based where I am here outside of Ithaca. And what, so for the chapters, kind of what's your, I mean, I'm sure anybody can come in from anywhere and always welcome, but what's your kind of geographic radius or pull or whatever?
Well, I think we're looking for mainly just anyone that's in the area. I know that I have personally gone to other Trail Sisters events whenever I was visiting the area. So I know quite a few people in the Trail Sisters Pittsburgh, and then I met some people at the Trail Sisters Morgantown chapter at a race. And so it's anytime that you're traveling anywhere and want to go on a trail run and looking for new places to go or maybe some people to run with, it's a great thing to look up on their website, and you can find other ladies to run with.
Cool. Sounds good. And for any of you who are interested, or if you want to connect further with Ashley, feel free to drop me a line through the Trails Collective and I can connect you with Ashley. And then maybe in the future, Ashley, you can give me a heads up if you've got stuff going on as well, and I can plug it again, or any of them out there. I know one of our longtime Trails Collective supporters is Grace Langheim, also with the PA Trail Sisters crew. So if there are other crews of you out there, feel free to reach out, and we can see if we can spread the word.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Ian. Hopefully we'll be there with us on Sunday.
Yeah, right on. Thanks so much, Ashley.
Bye.
All right, see ya. All right, so check that out for sure. Trail Sisters, pretty awesome. I think trail running is still one of those things where it's predominantly white, older dudes like myself just out there. So it would be great to see if we could diversify that a bit. In addition to Trail Sisters, trying to really expand the pool beyond just old white dudes. I've also tried to reach out to some other groups like Black Men Running, the chapter out of Philadelphia, as well as the one out of Brooklyn. I've also reached out to Black Women Running out of the Albany and Buffalo areas up here. And so far, I've made some contacts, had some good conversations, but haven't been too successful in getting individuals to join us who might not otherwise. So we will keep chipping away at that and see if we can make our awesome trail community even more awesome by making it a little bit more diverse. So thanks to all of you out there who are also working to do the same. So if Steve Malin is out there, Steve, if you're trying to log in and I can't see you, I apologize, but I can't see you. If you end up tuning in tonight, maybe I can break or pull you through, or we'll pull you through between the Barkley and Scott McCoubrey segments. So I am going to move into pulling Alyssa, Michael, and Chris into the feed here. Thank you all for being with us tonight. And I will do an introduction a bit for each of you in case people out there aren't already familiar with your chops. So let's start with you, Alyssa. Alyssa Godesky with finishes at Western, second place marks at Old Dominion and Hurt. She may be most known for a win at the Jarman's Invitational Marathon in 2020 on the event front. Yeah. Beast mode has been displayed in FKTs on the Vermont's Long Trail in 2018, and more recently, an incredible effort of 3 days, 16 hours for the Adirondack High Peaks in 2020. And I thought that was a pretty incredible effort. I was out there. I don't know if I was more of a help or a hindrance, but I was trying to assist. Sarah Kai's also going for it at the same time. And I can just in the, I don't know, 18 hours, 24 hours, whatever I was out there with Sarah, can attest to just how burly that effort was and just how incredible it was. And we crossed paths with Alyssa, I don't know, maybe a couple days in or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but I'm just gonna put it out there because that's kind of, how it went that time. So as we were sending, so I dropped back from Sarah. I was filling up bottles in a creek. and then doing my best to catch back up with her. And for all of you who don't know Sarah, a pretty incredible athlete. And so just trying to hang, let alone Sherpa or fill bottles, it took a little doing to kind of track her back down. And so I tracked her back up on this ascent, maybe caught up, maybe mid climb. I think we were headed up toward maybe Gray and Skylight before heading over to Marcy. And it was right there that Alyssa was coming down, descending. I think you had maybe one of your crew with you, I think at the time.
I did, yeah. And I was headed to Cliff and Redfield.
Yes. And Cliff and Redfield, there are two gems right there that you're headed into. And I don't know, we'll get into this maybe in a little bit with Barkley, but I mean, I guess it's definitely not Barkley, but I mean, they're definitely not walks in the parks with Cliff and Redfield, especially as far as you were in. But the embarrassing part was and I hadn't met Alyssa before. And I just kind of stayed back and let you guys chat for that minute as you continued to hammer on with one another. But I left and I mentioned to Sarah afterward, I was like, how are her teeth so white? Like, of all the things that I was focusing on the moment, here's this badass athlete who's wicked tough and doing this incredible effort. And I'm sitting here just watching you guys talk, and I'm like, wow, she's got really white teeth.
Thanks, Ian. My parents would be very pleased to know that.
That's good. Well done to them. Well done to them. I think I have a cavity in basically every tooth, and so I appreciate how stellar yours appear, especially a couple days into the Adirondack FKT attempt. So well done. All right. So Chris Roberts. Chris prefers them long and hard with multiple 100-mile finishes, including Grindstone and Hurt. He's a frequent flyer at Hellgate, which includes losses to John Anderson. He's multiple first loser or the assist role in finishing second at last person standing events, including Big's Backyard in 2021 with, was it 350 miles?
Yep.
Yeah. Alyssa, what was your total miles for the Adirondacks?
165.
165. Yeah. Well, yeah, 350. That's not a small amount of miles at all, actually.
They're flat, so, you know.
Yeah, but it's still 350 miles. How long? What was the duration?
3.5 days.
3.5 days. Yeah. Regardless, pretty phenomenal. And a segue into Barkley in 2021 with that effort. He's also just launched an endurance fuel company called Long Haul Nutrition, and maybe we can comment on that here in just a few minits as well.
I'd like to point out up here, these are my finisher medals for Jarman's. So,
yeah, actually, I think I was going to mention you were a Jarman's person as well, and you were, I think, were you second at Jarman's?
No, I don't think so.
You weren't. Dubova, were you? Somebody here was second at Jarman. Alyssa, you.
Dubova's always second, isn't he?
Yeah, like yes. I've been second 4 times, I think.
Okay, all right, let's get into that then. All right, Michael Dubova, relative newcomer on the official or trackable trail and ultra scene. Michael, similar to Chris, is very good at finishing second, particularly at Jarman's. There it is. But also Eastern Divide, Thomas Jefferson 100K, and Old Dominion. He's also pretty good at laying down phenomenal runs at Hellgate and took the win at the Barkley Fall Classic in 2021 to secure his entry into the Barkley. We'll just go with Barkley, the Barkley Marathons. And so thank you all for being on here today. Yeah, he is rocking the beats, Larry Logan on Chris Roberts. So thank you. All right. So let's get into it. So I have a couple questions here that maybe we'll just set up some discussions for each of you, and then maybe we can just get into a more general discussion of how it went out there. So Alyssa, I will maybe just start with you. So it would seem your effort on the Adirondack High Peaks had elements of being a good resume building training effort for Barkley. Steep climbs and descents, a ton of elevation gain and loss, and some thick, obnoxious bushwhacks. You made it 3 days in the Adirondacks, but only one loop of the beast that is Barkley. Can you talk a bit about the comparative values and results?
Yeah, I think that the Adirondacks and the long trail effort both were catalysts to me even thinking I could take on something like Barkley, because they are quite a lot of elevation gain and descent in the miles, and it's not smooth terrain, it's technical East Coast trail running. So really it started with the long trail that gave me kind of planted the seed that it might be something I could do or want to do or could be good at. And then definitely after I finished the Adirondacks, I was like, yeah, I gotta really work on getting into Barkley, because I think, this sounds like it could be something that I'm good at, given I've done these. But the Barkley's different. It's like, it's definitely different. I think that for myself, I definitely modeled training for Barkley this year off of what I've done for the Adirondacks, specifically in terms of getting my legs ready to handle the climbing and the descending. I will say it was a lot trickier this year because I moved to New Hampshire last April, just about a year ago. And so with the earlier Barkley date, I was training through snow. I was doing a lot of my climbing in microspikes and snowshoes, descending in microspikes and snowshoes, not getting the same kind of off trail type of, terrain that you'd be getting down south. So I think that played into it a little bit for sure. There's definitely a lot of things I would change up, but I would say what took me by surprise, given what I have seen in things like the Long Trail and the Adirondacks, and then heading down there, and I've trained in Frozen Head on the trails and stuff, so I'd seen the trail portions, was just the steepness and the length of all of those off trail climbs being steep and longer than I expected. And I think I just thought the training would kind of translate a little bit more with what I did, and it took me off guard, for sure, a little bit there.
And what was the, so when you were, and Michael and Chris and Alyssa, as we're talking to those guys as well, for any of you, if anything jumps to your mind or that'd be fun to talk about, feel free to cut in as well. But when you mentioned you were doing basically similar training to what you're doing with the Adirondacks, what does that look like for you? What are you doing in terms of training efforts and building up?
I'm doing, I think a lot of the weekends I would do something where Saturday I would kind of, accumulate some vert and try and get a lot of vert in the minimal amount of miles, right? And so here where I am, I had a 1/4 mile stretch of trail that gained 350 feet. So pretty steep, and in 15 miles, you can get 10,000 feet of vert, right? And be out there for several hours to do that. So it'd just be up and down, that sort of thing. And then the following day, try and either do that again, maybe, or maybe go for more miles, So I was doing a lot of time on my feet. But because of winter, I was definitely doing less like trail running than I would. When I got ready for the Adirondacks, I was training in the Adirondacks for a good 2 weeks ahead of time to just be on that terrain. And I would have loved to have been in the whites or, get in 20 to 25 miles of good vert and miles and technical terrain here. But it was just, snowshoes and slow going. You're not going to be able to do that kind of thing and get the same result in the winter. So I would do more gravel roads to get in the miles and things like that. And I think it was good. I think just, different lengths and more off-trail training without snow would have helped me.
Do you think that it's possible if, and I could sign off for it if you want, if you just say mailed a letter to Laz and just asked if he could move Barkley to maybe, I don't know, September next year, or like,
I know,
if it's hot,
right?
maybe November, and maybe that would be helpful because then you could just train through the summer. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that would make my life a lot better, I think, and increase my chances a little. I mean, that's, Jarman's is in August, so that's like prime time for me.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Chris, your ability to take a hit and get back up shined at Biggs last year. As you neared the beating that would be Barkley, did you find a bit of stock in knowing you're capable of getting back up a whole lot of times?
I mean, the biggest thing that I learned from Biggs was that I wasn't going to experience like drowsiness or that, kind of like whole body fatigue early on. I kind of expected like I don't want to say obviously, but let's be honest, I wasn't going to finish 5 laps out there. It wasn't happening. But I knew even then, if it came to something like that, I could probably do the whole thing without sleeping. So getting that having that fortitude from the Biggs experience was probably the biggest kind of mental benefit for me. Just kind of knowing I've been there before, I've been past that level of exhaustion. Yeah. that was the biggest thing for me.
Which is, I imagine, a huge deal. What was the, and it's probably not uncommon down there, but what was the, it was kind of down to, who was it? And he was just kind of wandering around a town, or somebody called the sheriff or something like that. And
When Carl was out there on Loop 4. Yeah.
yes.
And I was
Yeah.
honestly a little surprised that, I mean, he made a navigational mistake in the dark, it sounds like, but then, yeah, I thought it was a little odd, to me at least, that he was kind of going loopy and hallucinating so bad at that point in the race. I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was that far along in terms of the time duration, but you know, to each his own when it comes to hallucinating. So.
Which is, I mean, it's funny as I'm talking to some individuals or friends so far in some of these TC live series, for all of you, just kind of where the bars are set. Like, I'm talking to just really incredible individuals. I mean, you're three of you here, so you know, whether you think of that of yourself or not, but so incredibly tough, and so you know, if we can say talented. But so it's funny to you say, like, I'm surprised that he was like loopy at that point when you're talking. Oh, actually, how many hours in would that have been at that point? Would he have been?
He was maybe less than 40 hours, maybe about 40 hours when he probably stumbled into town. So
Okay, all right. I was thinking it was longer than that. For some reason I was thinking in the moment that he was like pushing into like the third day, and then I was like, well, you know, I mean, that's you could say it's early, but for the mere mortal or whatever, you know, just being up like that long over that terrain and that depletion or whatever. But all right, yeah, I mean, I guess 40 hours is still a bit early into it. But I guess in terms of not necessarily knowing just what your body's going to be capable of, and I imagine just given the conditions this year, you all, and Michael, maybe you can talk about it in a bit here too. But with him, I imagine the depletion was a little bit higher. I mean, if it were really that cold and that kind of nasty overnight, that it really just, it takes something more just out of you in terms of depletion. I don't know whether you guys felt that, but it would seem like I could see, even if it were only 40 hours.
I mean, I think, I mean, and I can't speak for the front group, right? Michael, you were in it, but I mean, it definitely took me by surprise too. I will say, like, how hard my effort was to do a 10-15 loop, essentially, right? Like, I definitely thought, given the approximate distance and elevation you think you're going to be going, I thought I could go kind of like an FKT pace, which, you know, in the first day of the Adirondacks, I'm pretty comfortable, you know? And I was hoping, right? Hopeful that would be the case for a loop, maybe to start at Barkley. And I mean, people go hard from the start. And I think that's kind of what a lot of people believe that has to be done to finish 5 loops. And so then there's kind of an effect after that, right? And so, because no one's finished 5 loops by doing all 10-hour loops, you know, just consistent across the board kind of thing. So it went out, I thought, pretty hard from the start. And I don't know how much that kind of came into play for people in the later loops, you know, succumbing to some of the elements and stuff and just having more taken out of them.
Yeah, Michael, I'd love to hear your take on that, being as how you were out at the very front of it.
He's like, no, I was fine.
It's so easy. No big deal.
I don't know. It was definitely quick. Like, especially, am I echoing to you guys? Does it sound echoey?
It sounds okay on my
Okay. Maybe it's just the water in my ears. I feel like I'm talking underwater, but I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I think it felt really frantic at the start for the first few books. And like those front guys, you could definitely tell we're trying to shake people off just to have some elbow room. So yeah, definitely went out kind of quick. And it felt kind of chaotic. But later on, like when it was kind of the group of like, it was like 5 of us or something. I don't know. We kind of just maintained and kept moving. It's kind of tough because it did get so warm later in the day. So I think that kind of affected overall feelings of like effort. It's just kind of like moving. Like it kind of waxed and waned. There were some parts where we pushed more, some where we didn't. The downhills, we bombed all the downhills, but it felt like fine. It just felt like relaxed, like you're just moving, like with the landscape type thing. And
So it's kind of like a comparative effort. I mean, in some of these longer ones, I mean, I guess it's so unique in terms of the terrain and the format. But when you say it was kind of going out comfortably, I mean, I guess your brain and body and physiology is already measuring the effort to what's ahead. But when you say it's comfortable, would it have been kind of commensurate with your, I don't know, output at something like Hellgate? I mean, is that kind of where you were putting your body in terms of?
It's just different because it's just this like. You're either going up or down, really steep stuff, and so it's just a consistent movement forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like, I don't even know if you can call it running really.
No,
it's either falling or you're kind of like climbing uphill. I've kind of lost my train of thought, to be honest.
Yeah, that's all right. So something that a couple of you had said. Chris, you had said in terms of your mentality going in, I mean, you're preparing for 5 loops in terms of you have to have the amount of nutrition. If everything goes well, you're at least prepping for that. But when you were saying, let's be honest, I wasn't going to make 5 loops or whatever, that's a fairly kind of deep-seated thing to go in with. How did you feel comparatively like at like bigs, where you like to, I have no concept of how this is going to go. I'm just going to hang in there as long as it is. Or did you have some, because 350 miles, I'm guessing you didn't come in saying, I don't know, I can probably do 348 miles fine. The next like 2 miles are probably going to be a little hard. But like I can do 348. But like that's a huge like effort. So some part of you must have been open to exceeding what you are capable of. But did you kind of, I guess with something like Barkley, knowing it has such a low finish rate, I mean, I guess that's got to make it a very tough thing to bite into and really get yourself to believe. Like, I guess, how does that go? And for Alyssa and Michael as well. Michael, I know you were prepping and wanting to be out there 5 loops, and you probably focused on that. Alyssa, I mean, I don't know how you were feeling about knowing that, also low finish rate and a female hasn't done it yet, but like how does that go mentally?
Right. So for me, like, I'm a realist. I knew that it wasn't going to happen probably. And my training had been complete crap since bigs. So the last 4+ months, I had a hip injury that really limited my ability to build, the speed and skills that you needed, like fast downhill running. I just couldn't do it because it was just too risky. So I knew the best I could do is hope to maintain. And so I knew, like, I have this level of fitness that I can go in with, and it's not going to be, the front packs 8 flat, first lap. It's going to be more like 10 hours. But I know that if I can do something like that, maintaining that effort, that's going to feel easy, and hopefully I can just kind of carry that forward and not make mistakes. But then on the other end of it, you have to recognize that when you're out there, especially in the dark, and you have never been there before, if you don't have someone holding your hand, you're going to make mistakes. Like it's pretty much impossible. I mean, a lot of the time that I lost out there, I didn't have like navigational errors in like the macro sense, like I went on the wrong ridge or, I'm going the wrong direction. It was more like I'm running downhill, and then the next thing I know, there's a cliff right in front of me, and I've got to spend 15 minutes like trudging through rhododendron, going one direction and not finding a way out, and then going the other way, and then finally figuring out how to go down. But like that's 15 minutes of moving 0 feet,
Mm-hmm.
So that was the big thing for me, is just recognizing that there's going to be mistakes, and I'm just gonna have to live with it. So yeah.
And Alyssa, how about you going in? Like, what was your mental state in terms of how you, like, what you really bought into, or what was real for you in terms of your kind of vision?
Yeah, I was absolutely betting on myself. I was going in with the mentality that I can absolutely do 5 loops, and was prepping for that, and was, ready to do that, I think, mentally. I think that for me, like looking at, no woman has finished 5 loops. There hadn't been a fun run in such a long time. I look at a lot of that as a numbers game. There are just so few women getting to run it every year that when you look at it over the broad spectrum, like it's been going for decades, and only 15 men have finished, and there's so many more men finishing every time, right? Like the percentages don't add up in my mind to say like women aren't capable of finishing the loops. It's just pure math. We just haven't had enough women. And at that, it's like pretty subjective to who is running, right? Like Laz gets to pick the women. So I think that for me, you know, knowing no woman had finished 5 loops really didn't, of course, it's like, well, it must be really hard. Like I grasped that. I looked at women who had attempted and, you know, not gotten through 5. But, you know, I talked to Sue Johnston a little bit. She's gone out on a 4th loop. She's actually gone technically the furthest as a woman. And she had come out on the long trail to see me out there, you know, in one of the sections. So I know her just, you know, pretty minimally, but she was like, I think you can do it, you know, and like things like that. So I certainly believed in myself. And I think that I was excited to kind of learn a lot. And, you know, if nothing else, just have a go at learning and getting as far as I can. But I was definitely surprised that my time there ended as soon as it did.
Mm-hmm. And then on just the gender note, I think you're probably right in terms of just playing stats, and also when you're considering in terms of just the physiological attributes or variables or whatever, that kind of in some ways, the longer and tougher that females would the equation would start to flip on maybe who it favors in terms of finish rates and times. And so you're playing the numbers game, and is it really just, you think there's less applications kind of, you know, coming in or getting picked, or what would it take to get more like in that mix to kind of flip those numbers or get them to say, dude, like you need to accept more females?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't ask him. I haven't heard him talk about how like the percentage breakdown of the gender split with applications he gets, you know. After being there, I can say the skill sets to be successful are quite specific, you know. You have to have nav. You need to know how to use that, right? And you need to be pretty proficient at it. It's not just map and compass. You have to be comfortable reading terrain in daytime and darkness, all that stuff. You have to be comfortable and willing to do off-trail travel, which a lot of the top ultra runners, I mean, it's dangerous. Like I tweaked my knee, you know, I mean, an injury can happen like that. And I admire Courtney Dauwalter a lot more now for going year after year, because I mean, she's arguably, you know, the best ultra runner in the country, if not the world, right? On the female side right now. And it's not super safe to be running at Barkley at the speed you have to be running to be successful, you know? And so I think it's tough to find people who are willing to practice that kind of stuff, to feel comfortable to put themselves out there and do it, because it could be career ending. And, you know, I mean, I hate to sound dramatic, but I think it very easily could be if things went awry, you know? And so I can certainly, you know, I don't fault people for not applying for that reason, but I hope that if it's just a matter of being intimidated by the skill set, you know, I have, in 2018, when I decided to start applying, I immediately started doing Rogaine events, orienteering events, and learning nav and starting to build that skill set and learning that bushwhacking existed, learning that people went off trail, you know? So it's absolutely a skill. And it's one that like my abilities have gone from terrible to mediocre, you know? But you can develop that. And I hope women see that. And honestly, just like awareness that those events exist, you know, like 2 weeks ago, I did a 2-day, 10-hour Rogaine each day in West Virginia. And so it's just navigation on foot, like a foot race like that, you know? And so those events are out there, and your local orienteering club probably exists, and you may not have ever known that it existed. And so those are things that can really help you do well there. And I just, you know, whether it's interest or resources or time to be able to commit to that, I'm not quite sure what the barriers are just yet, but hopefully, you know, more, I think it's talking about it more and telling people that exists, you know, might hopefully spark some interest and get more of the women applying and learning.
I think another part of it is making sure that the women who are seemingly capable of performing well at Barkley are given the opportunity to be there multiple years in a row. Because I don't care what anybody says. I mean, there are a couple of the people that have gone out there for the first year and they nail it. But I'm sorry, it's just not really practical. you've got to go out there and you've got to make mistakes and you've got to learn year after year and kind of build up your knowledge of the course. And, you know, if you just give some good women, you know, like one chance and it doesn't work out, I don't think that really is indicative of the talent level of the women out there, because there are women out there that can finish. I firmly believe that there's a handful out there. I don't know exactly who they are. Maybe it's you, Alyssa. I don't know, but I don't know who the next men are that are going to finish the race either. So,
and to that point, it's a huge commitment, like man or woman. If you decide to commit year after year, and hopefully you're someone that he sees potential in and he'll, you know, let in year after year to keep having repeat tries, you're committing your winter. It's a really hard training. You know, you're committing what's typically an off season, and it's tough to do that when there's no, you know, especially at the top level. I mean, there's not a lot of prize money in general, but, you know, it's a cool race and it's one I absolutely now would advocate, you know, doing that for. But you also don't know, like, if he's going to pick you know, it's not like, it's not even as cut and dry as like a lottery system, right? So there's so many unknowns. And I think it's easy to get deterred in that process, like man or woman.
Michael, you had mentioned earlier that off the front that some of the leaders were just trying to maybe shake some people or create a little bit of breathing room around them. So as Alyssa and then Chris were just talking, I was thinking it would be to that point of training for some of the variables that, yes, resources exist out there, such as orienteering clubs, events, whatever. You can go out and do this stuff on your own. But it seems like it could be a very specific, I don't know, you could do like a Barkley training week or whatever and like do all of these skills. And maybe those who had done it before would still get out there and it would be beneficial. And maybe you could have like different pods or whatever. But that would imply that there's a level of, I guess, cohesion or inter-support among the crews out there. So did it for all of you, but particularly since you referenced it, Michael, out there, is there a level of we're working together out there? Or when you mention that, Michael, it's more that's just stressful. You have others kind of looking over your shoulder or following you or not giving you berth to look at your maps? Or are they really trying to lose you because, I don't know, maybe they know the way or whatever and they don't want you to follow? Like, what's it like out there between pods or individuals?
I'm just thinking. I think it's just so much to process. I'm still processing all of it. So it's definitely the first like third of the loop. It was definitely like business. Like, if you can stay with us, great. If not, we could care less. I didn't really say anything the entire first loop because like I don't have anything to contribute here at all. I think I found like a deer antler and I pointed out to like Carl. I was like, "Look at the deer antler," and he's just like, "I don't care. That's not part of why we're out here."
Who is this guy? How did he get here? Yeah,
I was like, "Dude, it's like a huge deer antler," and nobody cared. So that was like the one thing I said. But yeah, it was definitely like, you know, people would help out with like if we all got to a book together, they'd say, "What's your bib number?" and you know, numerically they go through, hand you your bib number, and then we'd all like bolt. But there wasn't like waiting around. Is like, this is the pace we're moving. If you can keep up, great. If not, well, like, you know, you have a map and, you know, good luck, follow the footprints in the leaves type thing. But that wasn't really spoken about either. It was kind of just, you paid attention to the energy of everybody, and that was the culture of the pod I was in, which is fine. You know, it is what it is. That's not supposed to be hand holding out there, but you know.
And Chris, you were saying which was tough to do out there in terms of just follow tracks or whatever.
Yeah, he was talking about what I'd call the leaf churn, and being farther back. Like, I was always on the lookout and on my own for most of the time. I was trying to find leaf churn that indicated the trail that the people in front of me had gone down. It was like the proper path. The people that know what they're doing, the veterans, they clearly did this. And you can find it a little bit, but then it would just disappear. And you're like, crap, I just ran into a boulder field, or, you know, I just ran into a cliff. And So frustrating. But, yeah.
That was Michael trying to shake you, dude. He was like picking up some leaves and going. There's kind of like hashing out there.
Just throw them out there.
This will get him. Yeah,
Dude, I think I followed I was trying to do that on the second loop. It was getting dark, and I started following what must have been like the wild boars or warthog.
Yeah.
And I actually saw the same pack of like 6 or 7 scurry by like 2 different times. And each time it felt like I was just more of a failure for following them. So yeah, the leaf turn was not as I thought it would be better than it was.
Nope.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though.
And in the dark too. I mean, because
Yeah.
you don't need it going uphill.
Right.
You climb. It's super easy. But the downhills where you need to be making up time,
Yeah.
if you lose it, you're kind of out of luck for a while.
Yeah.
And Chris and Alyssa, were you pretty much on your own, or did you latch on with others who were kind of? Yeah.
I had a couple groups through the first loop that it solidified, I guess, by about halfway through. So I started out with a veteran, Jody Eisner, and he had a lot of us, I guess, at once, and that was pretty comfortable. Like at that point, I was like, all right, this might work out. And then he decided to turn on the burners on us, and I tried to really stay with him and hang with him, and that kind of just strung out the pack even more. And so I ended up with like one other guy who was a virgin at Barkley for another couple books, and then we eventually kind of got caught by 2 Swedish women, and then another guy, Ian, who was a veteran. He had run 1 loop the year prior. And so we kind of, we had some other people kind of come and go through that mostly, but we were kind of all together on the same wavelength with like pace that we wanted to be doing, but mostly like precedent took the mental wavelength was that we all knew that middle section of the course was probably the most confusing for navigation coming through, and we just decided to hang together. 5 pairs of eyes were going to be kind of better than 2 or 1 at a time, right? So we figured if we were slowing down a little just to keep ourselves together, that was the right call. And then for like the last third of the course, we separated a little bit, and then I became a group with Ian, and then Anna and Johanna, the Swedish women. So it was the 4 of us that kind of finished up that loop together and started the second loop. So it was really nice to have a group. It was definitely, for sure, teamwork gets you, if you can find a group that's going the pace you want, it's really, really helpful. But I think also something I personally would work on is being prepared to go alone as well. Mm-hmm. And just having the confidence to do that, I think, is just as important.
Yeah.
In terms of the prior experience and confidence, Michael, you had won the Fall Classic. Do you feel like that was indicative of kind of what was to come? Does doing that event give you a good indicator of what it is? Just going to need more of it for the full, or is it you kind of get to know maybe these known trail sections, but it really doesn't give you a feel for really what's ahead with the marathon?
It served me well to be able to like look at a map and kind of visualize aspects. Yeah, just the Fall Classic basically uses like a lot of the established trails and frames it all in. So it's kind of nice to kind of have that as references and for feeling slightly oriented. But it's still also the Fall Classic's like nothing like Barkley. Barkley's a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah. The Barkley being like the Barkley Marathon one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the Fall Classic's fine and great, but the real deal is amazing.
Yeah.
The Fall Classic, I don't think has, repeated 1,500-foot climbs at 50% pitches where
yeah, no, you're on the trails and you
grab.
do rat jaw a couple times,
Yeah.
but that's all just, insane thorn jungle. So it's just different. But
Speaking of that, and just getting the visuals, because you often see, I don't know whether it's Coming Up Ratchaw or some of the others, where you see the photos of people just completely like gashed from all the briars or whatever in their legs or whatever. And every time I'm looking at it, I get that there's like hot portions, but knowing like that's what's ahead, like, why are people wearing shorts out there?
I mean, if it's over like 50 degrees, you might want shorts. I wore tights the whole first loop, and in the afternoon it was warm.
yeah.
So like if it was another 3 or 4 weeks later, if it was in April like it usually is, and you got a warm afternoon, it would be miserable. Like just absolutely brutal.
It's also, I grew up or in times just running through the woods off trail, whatever here in the Northeast, and you get particularly later in the year sections that are totally overgrown with blackberries or whatever, and you get all gashed up and you don't necessarily notice it in the moment, but then you get back and finish the run and you get in the shower and you're like, wow, like that's like 28 slashes like on my leg or whatever. And I guess there's some of that where maybe you don't necessarily notice in the moment, but like that's like just death by 1,000 cuts out there in terms of just your body is just like, yo, like I just got a cut on my leg. I got to react to this. I'm going to send some blood that way. We're going to try to send some resources that way. I need you to just pipe down. Then you do it again. And then you do it like 123 more times. At some point, your body's going to be like, this is just stupid. Like just stop. And so I get that it's hot, but I might kind of want to wear Kevlar like out there in some of those sections. All right, a couple questions. There are a couple comments from Ellie in here. You guys can potentially see them in the thread as well. The first one was, you ain't selling this race, to be honest. And Ellie, whatever, she's like a road marathoner. And all right, so she golden ticketed at some race recently, but like that was like a road race. Come on. And she, all right, so it seems like if you're not finding your way to Barkley like on your own terms, that even though maybe and I still haven't watched the movie, but knowing that the movie was probably pretty entertaining and turned a lot of people onto it, it seems like one of those things that maybe that's not necessarily one that you turn on people like an entertainment value. Like it's just a beast of an event. And so it's nice to find out about it, but it's like either you're into Barkley or you're not, but it's not really one to necessarily sell to somebody.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Fair. If you guys had comments on that, that's fine. But yeah, that was my take. Maybe not one to convince somebody of. And Chris, I was going to mention this as well. Chris, how did your long haul nutrition go for this race? Did you use it exclusively? We were joking before we went live here tonight, and I hopped on. Chris was chomping on something, and I just joked that maybe that was some just powder balls of his long haul nutrition that he's just sitting at home, just kind of gnawing on long haul nutrition.
That's all I consume nowadays, just 24/7.
That's good, because that's what he's in for the long haul. And he just mentioned, and Alyssa was funny, chimed on around that time. He just said, "Oh, it's kind of sad because you come home with all these, whatever, you're unpacking it and unpacking the expectations of, you're coming prepared for 5 loops and you're coming home with 4 loops worth of food or whatever." And so, but speaking to that, Chris, was that what you were using out there paired with real food?
Yeah, it was, basically there's only so much liquid you can really carry. So I had a decent amount of kind of solid food type stuff, in gels or in pouches and stuff. But yeah, I was using long haul in a bladder. I had it filled up, and then, like a 20-ounce bottle that I used, after each water drop I would fill up and just dump in a few hundred calories of that along the way. So worked fine.
And Alyssa, with your FKT background, it would seem like you'd have your at least gear selections fairly dialed in from the efforts that you've done. And maybe given if you're self-supporting out there and carrying this stuff and humping it through the woods or whatever, that would be a benefit in terms of your resume and what you've done in the past in terms of having gear dialed. Did any of you have any gear issues, or you got out there and you're just like, maybe I should have planned this better?
Chris and I both at least broke a pole, right? I think.
Mine was like when I was with Alyssa for a little while at the beginning, and then I stopped to tie my shoe and they went off ahead. And I wasn't really too worried about it. But yeah, like probably 20
Did you at that moment, not to interrupt you here, but weren't you just like, yo, guys, I need to tie my shoe? Hang on a minute. I'm going to look at the leaves, but if you could just hang on a minute, that would be great.
Yeah, no. I tried to be patient, but no. So like 20 minutes later, I snapped the pole. And yeah, it was like we were 2 hours in. So.
Did you yell at that point?
I was pretty angry. There were some words that were thrown out.
Yeah, I was not pleased either when mine snapped.
But did you find a stick? Because I found great walking sticks.
Well, so it's funny when we passed you on the Leonard's butt slide out and back, I saw you with a stick. And so I was like, that actually like was one of the first things that entered my mind when my pole snapped. I was like, oh, like that's why Chris had a stick. But I was like, Chris's stick looked way too heavy. I'm not carrying a heavy stick around. So.
It was burly, but it was fairly lightweight. So.
Yeah. So, but by the time mine snapped, it was like pouring. And so I would see one that looked promising, pick it up, and it just like crumbled in the wetness in my hands. And I was like, oh, but I found a couple good ones and it would disintegrate and then you'd find a new one. And so, and not having poles, I mean, Greg, who went on to loop 4, did quite a bit of the race without poles. And I have no idea how that's possible.
I will say there are some stretches where it's too steep for poles. Like,
that's true.
Like it's so steep that you put your poles in and there's not enough bite. Like if the poles just slip on down and you basically face plant into the hill. But it's not very far because it's so steep. It's only like 6 inches of falling forward.
And that makes you feel good about yourself in that moment, I imagine.
I moved forward progress.
Forward face plant.
And Michael, for those of you who don't know, Michael is instrument maker in his shop there, stuff up in the back. Do you feel like that was beneficial for you out there? If you were to have broken a pole, that you'd be able to identify wood species and trees and be like, that's a really solid stick right there.
That was plan A. So that was, and I felt really good about that. So yeah, I felt like a bomb-proof plan. So, zero concern.
There were, and maybe, it's not necessarily one where you'd need poles, but in Hellgate this year, I was also on the hunt in those long leaf stretches for just some poles, just because, I don't know, because I was just kind of meandering about and moving really slowly. And so I was like, maybe I'm just going to pick up some poles here. And so there were a couple of those sticks too where I'd pick up, and it looked kind of like a good stick, but then the first time you plant it, it kind of snaps at the bottom. You're like, damn it. And then it becomes slightly too short, and then it's kind of awkward. And then I'm kind of looking around thinking, what am I doing here playing in the woods looking for like sticks or whatever? Like, dude, get a hold of yourself here.
It definitely comes across to the outside world as like playing in the woods.
Yeah. Yep, that's good. All right, let's see. And McCoubrey is on that back end. So Scott, thanks for being on. We'll try to wrap up here in a few minutes on the Barkley segment. Let me see. There were a couple other questions I had.
I want to know when you guys quit. I'm interested in hearing when and why you guys quit, like mentally or physically or whatever.
We had the rain for us started. So we got to the top. We got to like book 1 before we pulled our lights out. And then the rain started book 3, which is probably the coldest place possible. Just high up, windy, cold, and then pouring rain on us all of a sudden, right? So we all stopped to get our rain gear out, and Anna realized she didn't have her rain jacket. Like her crew had repacked in the campground and didn't put the rain jacket in. So she had an emergency blanket that she took out, put on, tied around her. We all got our rain gear on, that kind of thing. But I immediately was like, whoa, I don't have the right like gloves, to be out here in wet conditions when it's this cold for like too long. So I was a little mindful of that already, I guess. And then my pole snapped on that like next descent. So then we had like one thing go wrong, then the pole snapped. And then we had, we found the next book, but it was definitely slow going and hard to find book 4 for us. So I would say our mood just like plummeted in that segment of time. And then climbing up, I think we all mentally thought, okay, we're going to get warm. And we just weren't getting that warm. And then we had another navigational kind of issue with book 5. So basically we got ourselves good and lost and really cold. And I mean, you guys know, like those conditions, it was almost harder to be with more people, because when you wanted to stop to assess where you were, it was like more multiple stopping than if you were just by yourself kind of making the decisions and moving faster. I almost think that was like kind of coming into play, which was interesting. And so we just had a lot of micro stops, and the three, me and Johanna and Anna, our bodies just got frozen. And, you know, Anna's a Swedish mountain guide. I did a winter Pemi loop in the Whites. Like I've been in cold conditions in the mountains, and it's like, you know, yourself, and you know, when, you know, I wanted to be a woman that went really far at Barkley, but I wasn't going to risk being like the first rescue at Barkley to do so, you know, like that would be way worse, way worse. And so, yeah, I mean, it came down to safety over like, and we all just admitted like we didn't bring the gear required to keep ourselves warm in those conditions. So we three just decided we had to go back in, and Ian actually stayed out, who we were with, and he soldiered on, and we did the long, once we got ourselves found, which probably took about 30 minutes, then we had the long road back on Quitter's Road.
I don't know. I passed Ian at some point, but I don't know how or where it happened. So.
I know. I do wish we had like a way to go back and be able to look at, because we probably crossed paths with a lot of people out there and just had no idea that they were the next, you know, tree over, basically.
And how about for you, Chris and Michael, in terms of the moments and the thoughts and whatever, the emotion when you also pulled the plug?
Well, I didn't pull the plug.
I was right. It was time on you, right?
I finished the second loop over the time limit. I got all my pages.
Right.
I spent a good amount of time out of there in the cold and dark. Not necessarily getting totally lost, but like not finding a book and that kind of thing, and spending an hour in the wet cold. But yeah, somehow I was able to trudge on. I had like 2 rain jackets. I was totally prepared in that regard. I had like rain-proof pants and all that stuff. So I never really felt truly cold.
Well, actually, and it looks like Michael just lost his connection. So if he comes back, I'll plug him back in. But he must have lost it. So, and that was, I guess, going to be one of my other questions or points. Then, Chris, was, I mean, it seems like something like this is a big enough just endeavor where there's so many angles where it can just find and exploit your weaknesses, whatever that might be. It may be navigation, it may be climbing, it may be overall fitness. In your case, maybe it was just speed. I mean, not that you're slow by any stretch, but I mean, that's a good point. Like you had the toughness again to keep taking beatings and going back out. But in this case, you kind of timed out.
I needed a veteran to hold my hand more than I thought, especially in the night. Like there was just so many opportunities to make mistakes and slow down. So that was the biggest thing for me. But even then, I wouldn't have been able to make it past 3 loops. I did not have the fitness for that this year. So.
And then Michael, how about for you for that point to make the call or make the decision?
For me, I knew going into it that my biggest thing to prevent me from like, I was dead set on 5 loops. Like I was like, my mind was made up, but I knew that so I have Raynaud syndrome, and so my hands like and feet are always like borderline numb and cold, even in the summer. So I was like, if it starts raining and cold, like that's going to be my biggest thing to get over physically and mentally. Because once my hands go, I lose like dexterity, and I can't even touch my fingers together. And so much less open and close gear and tear pages out. And so once it started raining and I was drenched within like 30 minutes, like all 3 layers, everything I had was just soaked. Couldn't feel my hands and feet, and my arms are going numb up to like my elbows. I kind of knew that it was going to be turning into like what happened at Hellgate 2019, where I was like, I got hypothermic and was like basically really close to dying for like an hour and a half. And just totally like gone. Like I was just, my core temperature was so low at Hellgate. So I knew, I was like, I cannot let that happen out here, especially knowing how long, like once you decide you're done, it still is to get back to camp. So it's kind of like Alyssa, like, I don't want to be a liability. Like, you have to kind of put your ego aside. I knew with like the Raynaud's and my jaw was starting to like uncontrollably chatter. I kind of knew that that was like the dominoes were starting to fall into like the land of hypothermia. And it just wasn't, it felt kind of irresponsible.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had to put my ego aside and be like, you know, because if what happened out there, what happened at Hellgate 2019, like I could have easily, I would just be dead out there because there's no way for anybody to get to you at all. And that would have just been like really awkward for a lot of reasons. So
I remember you like coming across you at Hellgate 2019, like at whatever that aid station was, Lookout.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that mountain is.
Little Cove or something.
Yeah, Cove. And you were just miserable. And I didn't have a proper rain jacket, you know, and I was soaking wet. But I remember like when I was at Barkley that night, it was like I made it through. I made it through
Yeah.
the Hellgate. So like I can do that. But that was a little bit different situation. I was lucky to have really good rain gear.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was surprised with how quickly all my stuff got soaked, like down to my core. And then it got super windy where I was, and then foggy. So it was like, this torrential downpour, fog, wind. And then also knowing that is going to be like 11 hours of rain, I was like, I'm already soaked and like can't feel like most of my body. So it's also like, if I can't unzip my coat to get food, like I can't even like take nutrition in. So it's just this like
I was having those same thoughts of like, I'm gonna have to change headlamp batteries at some point because it's only 2 hours into darkness right now. Like I'm gonna have to tear a page, like getting to a page, and I literally wouldn't have been able to tear the page from the books, right? And it's like you just start to realize that it's like don't go any further at that point.
And it's tough, like when you feel physically like you're ready to like just keep going, and like physically you feel good, and you know, before the rain and cold, and like mentally you're prepped to just like dig super deep. You know, it is disappointing to have to make that call, but at the same time it is, I think, safety and responsibility, and you know, you just have to make those game day decisions. So
yeah. Are there other angles that would be fun while the three of you are together here as you're all decompressing and hashing? And not that you can't be in contact outside of this, but in the moment, anything that would be fun to ask one another or to decompress on about the event or looking forward?
You guys need to hang out with me sometime on a little video chat, and you can show me exactly how to get through Stallion Mountain.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I know conceptually, like, what the roads are and where you're supposed to go, but, like, the specifics of exactly where to turn off, I was just like, because I was like 2 minutes away from catching Alyssa at that point, and I was like, I've got to catch these people so I'm not lost out here.
Oh, at the water drop, you were so close.
Yeah, I was so close, and I was, like, barreling to try and catch you guys, and I couldn't make it, and by the time I got to the turnoffs, I was like, I'm screwed. I have no idea exactly what I'm supposed to do here.
Isn't that the worst feeling when you just realize you're screwed?
Yeah. And
I got
I
lost for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And it's such a sinking feeling when you're like, I'm legit screwed, you know? And you just have to like sit there and be like, okay, well, I need to unscrew this. Oh my God.
There was made a couple trips up to Alaska, and one of the times we were doing this point to point where we flew into Anchorage, drove to McCarthy, like 8 hours southeast, and then we caught a bush plane out of McCarthy and got dropped off. It was like 45-minute flight in to the Wrangels, and then we were going to get picked up 5 days later at just this pickup point, which was this 5 day. Well, it was supposed to be 5 day hike away. And it was like our first time we got dropped off. It was like in the first hour or two, he dropped us off in this huge, just the immensity of the landscape, just huge, like anything I hadn't experienced. And so we're looking at the maps and I probably have a tenth of the skills that you guys all have. But we're looking at the maps, we're looking at the valleys, and we think our bearings, and we start walking toward this valley, and they just happened to pass somebody that was camped right on the periphery there, and just chatting for a minute. Where are you going? And here's where we're headed. And he's like, oh no, you're actually in the wrong valley. You kind of want to be in that valley, like 2 valleys over. That was actually much bigger. When I was looking at the map, I was like, it looks like a pretty big valley, but actually no, that's not the valley. And so, similarly, like our bush pilot was going to pick us up in this location 5 days later, and if we weren't there, at some point you send out a search or whatever, and we literally would have been screwed like an hour off the bat if somebody hadn't just been like right there.
The crazy thing though is that's Alaska. Like that is like such a vast wilderness, like I felt almost more confident going to Frozen Head because I had run trails there before. I had been to the area and kind of gotten my feel. And it's like, you're actually never that far deep into the wilderness.
Right.
So that just makes it even more mind blowing how truly lost people get.
Yeah.
Because you're not.
There's so many ripples.
Yeah. I mean,
Endless ripples.
It's just very interesting. The terrain. I mean, it's pretty remarkable actually, because you really aren't like that far from civilization to, in theory, ever get yourself into too much trouble, but like you still manage to.
If you're ever like, you really think you're lost there, you just like pick a direction. Like if you think you're on the eastern side of the course, which you should hope to know what side of the park you're on, just go to the direction of the nearest road. Like you'll get there in a couple hours.
Yeah.
So go to the direction of the nearest trail. You'll figure it out. Like you're not that far away. But
well, nice work to all of you. So go ahead, Michael. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say something sarcastic.
You can say something sarcastic.
No, the moment's gone.
That's fair.
It would have less effect. It would just be
true.
awkward.
That's
now.
fair. It would be awkward. Yeah. So does it leave you guys all wanting another round?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, nice work to all of you for getting there, for towing the line, and to at least laying it out there. And thanks for sharing some of it and decompressing with us tonight. And I will connect with you all on the next round. And feel free, if any of you wants to hang out and connect here with McCoubrey, you're welcome to stay on. But otherwise, I can connect with you next round.
thanks for the group therapy session.
Yeah, we owe you.
Yeah, absolutely. The bill invoice.
Let's know the copay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
All right, see ya. Scott.
Hey, Ian, how are you?
Buddy, I am good. How are you? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you also.
I had this, I've felt guilty this whole time in this past year since you switched gears and tracks that that you sent me some great shoes to test. And then I think I reviewed a couple and I felt like the reviews, they were, I don't know, like I had issues with a couple, but one of them really grew on me. And I was like, if I had more time, that would have colored the review better. But I was like, what if Scott sent me some shoes and then I put out this like review that wasn't phenomenal. And like Scott Sports Corporate was just like, dude, you sent it. Look, like you use crappy reviews. Why'd you send this Rube some shoes? And he put that out there and you got to go. So I hope that it was okay.
I've been involved in a lot of shoe reviews over the years, Ian, and you couldn't do me wrong.
All right, good. But know that I did one of them at least, and it's not here. I think behind me, it's at home. I'm still in the rotation that it did grow on me. But all right, so thank you for being on. Everybody who is tuning in, thanks for being with us for the Barkley segment. And here, I'm going to dig into a longtime friend, Scott McCroubrey, who I've been very thankful as part of my Roots session. And Scott is the general manager of Smiley Creek Lodge along the headwaters of the Salmon River in Ketchum, Idaho. Scott was marketing director for Montrail from 1995 to 2000. He owned and operated the Seattle Running Company from 1999 to 2010, was a multiple brand representative from 2010 to 2020, including stints as the U.S. manager for Scott Sports between 2011 and 2017. So Scott has for sure been at pretty much all levels of trail and running and so much more in the U.S. and for sure, from my vantage point, a foundational influence in so many ways with so many butterfly effects. And so, Scott, I am grateful to be taking a bit of your time here this evening.
Well, thanks for being so kind.
Totally, man. All right, so I have a list of questions or concepts here. Feel free to dig into any others if it would just kind of seem fun.
Sure.
And we'll just kind of see where that goes. So we'll start with, I guess, your roots. So you grew up a competitive skier and moved more into trail ultra later on. How's the body holding up, and what are your go-to physical pursuits these days?
Mostly I ski a lot. And I'm living in Idaho now, and you can see what's across the street from me right there, and
just
out my back door. And backcountry skiing in particular has been really kind on my body. And I won't say that running was bad for my body. As a matter of fact, it probably kept me as active as I've been even to this day. But am not really able to run a whole lot anymore due to a couple of joint surgeries. But still get out and mix it from hiking to running on my own solo out into the Idaho wilderness here. And so the mix of mountain biking and running in the summertime, and then the amount of skiing I get in, which is most days, keeps me super fit still. But my competitive days as an ultra runner are definitely seen the better days and are behind me for the most part. But you never know going forward, as you get older, it's
battle of attrition, right? You just got to hang in there where other people just kind of fade. And then who knows, maybe they got some amazing hardware to kind of beef up that knee or whatever those the joint weaknesses are.
Yeah. A little knee and a back. It's the back stuff and nerve damage is usually a hard thing to overcome as far as maintaining strength for the knee joint that's been operated on a couple of times, and arthritis catches up to you. But there's things for sure. There's, partial knee replacements, and I've had several Synvisc injections. I even had microfracture surgery, which kept me going for about 8 or 9 more years. And, as far as just the discomfort in my knee and being able to keep putting the miles on. But it's still, I'm still a big part of the local running community around here and whatnot, and have stayed involved in the footwear world in a big way, and continue to put on the White River 50 race up until just 2 years ago, which I passed on to James Warner. Since I've been living in Idaho now for quite some time. But mostly I just like to run off into the mountains, either on my skis or on my own with my dog nowadays.
So some things never change in that regard. I feel like that's how I met you, however, 20 some years ago, was you were doing that same thing. It's
the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And so Nancy Hobbs, Nancy's in Colorado. Is that where Nancy's
in Colorado? Yeah.
So I know you guys have crossed paths quite a bit over the years.
Sure.
But just ask the question: did you have back fusion?
So I had lateral discectomy. I L4 L5 blew laterally to the left, packed into my sciatic nerve area, turned on the nerve channel, and so they had to go in and remove the pieces of disc and whatnot out of my sciatic nerve area. They had some nice dime-sized pieces of disc they got out of there, and it was mostly a refrigerator that did it. I'm sure it was years of downhill ski racing in particular that was a little bit of the predisposition there. So it was a good 2-year recovery to even get back to skiing from from that particular surgery, but it's one of those things that doesn't always fully go away.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of one of those things you're managing on a consistent basis. But skiing and running, I think, keeps my joints strong, you know, as I keep moving that way. And I think after you do something like that, your best default for activity is what your body is used to doing. And skiing and running, you know, really at a different level and a different pace from the running standpoint in particular after the back surgery. But it's what my body was used to doing, and it still felt, you know, like the best activity to keep myself strong for sure.
Yeah. All right. And Nancy said she has L4, L5 issue. So she's relating in some regards there. All right. So let's dig in to some of your background pieces, because I think it's quite applicable. And for those who don't know you or find their way to this interview with you later on, and I know you've, I think Jamil Curry, I think, had you on relatively recently, maybe a year or two ago, and got into some of the roots. But really, it's in so many ways, I think, influenced what we know to be the trail and community space now. So I think it's really important to, I think, honor and celebrate and just keep that record, so to speak, here. So let's go into some of that. So a common theme connecting most of those in my Trail Route series has been a foundation in Montrail. You started that position in 1995, I believe.
And actually before that, I was the One Sport rep before they changed their name to Montrail. And so officially I started the One Sport team before Montrail existed. So
that would have made it One Sport that at the time, rebranding as Montrail in 1997. And that would have also made you instrumental within the team in those years. Yeah. So tell us about One Sport's shift and renewed focus in branding as Montrail back at that time.
Yeah. So, you know, personally, I was still in and around the ski industry. I actually left a 10-year gig with Nordstrom where I was selling, I was in the haberdashery business, managing men's suits in the East Coast in Washington, D.C. for Nordstrom. And I left a 10-year of, you know, intensive retail, where I'd moved away from the Northwest, DC. Running on trails was a great replacement for the access of skiing that I had previously had, and got into running marathons. And then when I moved back to the Seattle area, kind of the skiing and the running thing just came together. And I just started, you know, in the early 90s, just going out on my own and running routes that I hiked with my parents and backpacked with my parents in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness and Tiger Mountain, and then discovered Cougar Mountain, was right a mile and a half from my door. I was living at my parents' house and at the time. And so I, after leaving Nordstrom, I actually got hired from a friend of mine because I was boot fitting at Sturdivant's at a ski shop, and ended up becoming a rep in the Northwest for K2 inline skates and several other outdoor brands, tents, backpacks. And we picked up the One Sport brand. And at the time I was running trails. And then at the same time I was picking up the One Sport brand, I was just discovering that there was actually this competitive world on trails out there that really wasn't, the competitive aspects hadn't really evolved yet. You know, there definitely was a scene in the 100K and the 24-hour, guys like Frank Bozanich and David Horton was out there running across the U.S. and stuff like that. And at the time, Tim Tweetmeyer was winning Western States, and Ben Hyen was beating the Tarahmarans over at Angeles Crest. And we picked up the One Sport brand, and I'm like, you know what? To drive the sales of this one trail running shoe called the One Sport Vitesse, I think I'll make a little Northwest trail running brand in my territory and see if I can bump up REI's business and stuff. And so Jim Kirby was a local I got to know, and Dave Terry and I grew up ski racing together. And Rob Lang was another guy I met the first year I ran an ultra, which was White River, was my first ultra that I ended up directing for years, and created this little trail running team in the Northwest. And it really helped explode the sales of the Vertesse just in my territory in the Northwest, and created this little demand in some of the running shoe stores that they had never experienced as a hiking brand before. And, One Sport saw this happening, and started talking to me a little bit about, who I knew out there. And I've been reading about this guy, Tim Tweetmeyer, I told him, and I've been reading about this guy, Ben Hyen. And so they brought Ben Hyen in and had me come in and meet him. And we ended up signing the first, arguably one of the first ultra running contracts for a runner. I'm sure Ann Tracy had something with Nike preceding that. And there's a few that I'm missing here and there. But we ended up, sponsoring Ben Hyen. And then One Sport turned to me and said, we're changing our name to Montrail. We're a little bit nervous about the name change. You were really able to create this buzz in the Northwest with One Sport. Can you do that in the rest of the country? And I'm like, yeah, for sure I can do that. And, so I just kind of took that model from the Northwest, and being a salesperson and into sales management for a brand, I kind of designated the different sales territories in the US and started going out and trying to meet runners. And then as I met more runners, I would bring these runners with me to these races in different territories. And at the time, ultra running was very secular. You ran races in your area, and I went to Oregon, I'd go up to Vancouver, and so this actually started to kind of, taking guys that were on this team that we had started to create, like Dave Terry and Rob Lang, and we'd go out to the Way Too Cool 50K and meet Tim Tweetmeyer. Then we signed Tim Tweetmeyer on as one of the early Montrail guys. And then signed on Kirk Apt in Colorado. Then I took Kirk Apt and met Scott Jurek and signed Scott Jurek on. And me and Scott Jurek went to the East Coast, met up with Ian Torrance for the first time, and we went down to David Horton's race in Mountain Masochist to support that event, and got to know David Horton. And pretty soon we just had this really tight group of people that were from different parts of the country. But the model for me, from a marketing standpoint, was really to have 3 or 4, well-known, well-represented, people that everybody liked in each sales territory that could help us then place shoes into stores. And it really turned into a neat synergy with everybody once everybody got to know each other. And by the time 99 rolled around and I was opening Seattle Running Company, and picked up the White River 50 race, we hosted the national championships. And at our cabin up at Crystal Mountain with beds for 24 people, we had Tim Tweetmeyer, we had Ann Trayson, we had Courtney Campbell, we had I don't know, Dave Mackey showed up that year, and Ann Trayson was coming into the cabin going, "Can you introduce me to David Horton over there?" And someone else was like, "Oh, can you introduce me to Ann Trayson?" And we're all sitting on the floor together and running this race. And so it kind of created this model. And at the same time, Patagonia approached me to, they were coming out with their endurance line, and Jeannie Wall, who was the head of that division for them, she's like, "I really want to be a part of what you're doing." And so it became this Patagonia Montrail Ultra team, which really helped establish the Montrail name, because it wasn't known. It was a brand new brand, new name. One Sport hadn't been around that long and was only about 3.2 million in sales. So it was a small little hiking brand. And, I think in 4 or 5 years, probably 5 years, the Montrail brand went to probably close to 17 million in sales, I would think, over that period, mostly in this trail running venue. But
if you I guess you quantify that and you look at some of the stats, do you know what and it's fun to hear you talk about this stuff, because I think I started college in 95, finished in 99, but I remember having computers were still kind of new. Internet was like just coming on. So like, it's not like you could just hop on to Facebook like I do and be like, track this person down and reach out and send them a message or whatever. Like it's fun that you actually had to go to the races, or you're having to look at, I imagine there was like some sort of, like ultra running publication or something out there that you're hearing about or reading about, but it's much different time.
So, I first read about Tim Tweetmeyer, and then I think also Ben Hyen.
So when you said read about, like, where do you read about them?
Outside Magazine featured those guys, and at different times. And Western States, when I read about Tim Tweetmeyer in Western States, it completely fascinated me. And I got my buddy Dave Terry to go jump in and let's do this 50-mile race at Crystal Mountain, where we lived ski racing for years. And next thing you know, like 9 months later, him and I were at the start of Western States, and so it was all reading in magazines at that point. And so when I first got on with the One Sport deal, and they talked about nationalizing this team concept, the first thing I did was start dialing directory assistants.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
And then I discovered, Ultra Running Magazine was this resource. And there was a picture of Brandon Sobrowski in the middle of Ultra Running Magazine, leaning over a bunch of mushrooms with his dreadlocks just after he'd run like 3 hours and 21 minutes at a 50K in Big Bear, California, And so I was going to Wasatch that next year to pace Dave Terry. And one of my goals was to meet Brandon Sobrowski and see if he was someone I'd want to have on the team. And then I'm reading about Ian Torrance in the East Coast where he was at. And so I got on board with Vermont 100 and went out to support that event and also run it myself, because I ran all these events as well. And one of my goals there was to meet Ian Torrance and see if he was somebody that I'd want to have help in the Northeast with marketing the shoes. And great story with Ian was, I was at my it was the first year it was Montrail. So it was the Montrail booth, and Ian came in and got his stuff. And I had somebody, confirm that that's who that was, but I was too busy in the expo to approach him. And so somebody pointed out his car to me out in the field in the parking area. And I walked out to his car and he was asleep with his head against the window. And I never met him before. And so I knock on the window and wake him up. And I'm like, hey, Ian, I'm Scott McCoubrey. I'm like, do you need a place to sleep? And I'll buy you some dinner. Next thing you know, we're having dinner together. He's spending the night in my hotel room. We ran the first 12, 15 miles, maybe even longer of the race. He ended up third that year together. And next thing you know, Ian was part of that Montrail team and one of my best friends. And so that's kind of how it went. That's it was trying to figure out what events were attracting certain runners. And so I'd read about Ian Torrance. I found out he was going to Vermont. So I called up the race director at Vermont and said, hey, I'm with this new shoe brand. And there was nobody out there marketing. I said, I'll come and I'll help you boil potatoes, mark course. I'll do a raffle for your for the adaptive skiing sports for the expo, and I'll run your race. And that evolved into bringing these guys with me and going to run other events like at Horton's race or Way Too Cool for Greg Soderlin, and having Courtney and myself and Dave Terry, I'll say, in at Rick Simonson's house, who was always perpetual top 3 at Western States at the time, and running Way Too Cool together. And then we all just became really tight friends. And then the sales just kind of came along with that for Montrail, which was cool.
I remember
the question.
Yeah.
It was all about networking through, you had to read about someone, then I had to find their phone number, and then I had to find a way to meet them. And through the events, by supporting the events, I found that was the best way then to go out and meet the athletes.
Yep. And I remember it was probably only a couple times that I was in the Montrail. Must have been like the offices or something. Just must have stopped in a couple of days with Chrissy or something like that. But I remember being in there and just it seems pretty vivid, but I guess it's kind of morphing with maybe other publications at the time, where it was that initial, what ended up being the kind of the the poster athletes for Montrail, and literally like posters or like the big pictures blown up in the office or whatever. And it just seemed so, I guess, like cool, and like it was inspirational, and it was like these roots because it was something that still seemed kind of new. And it was this like dedicated like trail team. And I don't know, maybe it was like the 4 or 5 of them at like Trail Walker or something like that. I just remember thinking that's cool, right? And then you had, and some of them were very marketable, like going out to meet Brandon, and it's like, is Brandon going to be a good fit for the team? Well, whether he's a good fit or not, like it's kind of like Brandon became this very visual like poster boy for the like
Patagonia.
for Patagonia, but like just like the trail culture like as a whole, right? With like this long gnarly dreads and like wearing the running skirt, like kind of being
Braided
him
beard.
and doing his own thing, big like braided beard, right? This was like became a very
iconic look.
very iconic look.
Yeah. And Scott Jurek was a great personality too. Him and I, like, I was at a local 50K, and he was doing maybe a residency for PT out in Washington State. And me, myself, Jim Kirby, and Rob Lang, we were always kind of battling it out, a little bit, and in our local races. And we're all looking at each other. Okay, who's going to go today? And this young guy with black curls, just that none of us knew, just bolts off the front. We're all like, oh, he'll come back to us. Yeah, we'll catch him, yada, yada. And he was, drinking beer. And at the time he was eating pizza at the finish line by the time we got there. And by the end of that weekend, he was one of our athletes. And then me and Ben Hyen were hauling him up to Angeles Crest, and I was pacing Ben, and Dusty Olson was pacing Scott, and it was benefiting the race because you had this cool dynamic going on there, and the race directors loved it, and we supported each other. Even though they were competitive, it was a lot of fun competition at the time, for sure.
And what was it like? So this also just a different time and space in terms of how big the market was and what your budgets were. And so when you're going out and recruiting or getting these individuals all on like on board, like Tim and Ian and Scott, like what are you offering like as a brand? Like what were the packages to have what were you able to provide athletes at that point?
So, there was not a lot of competition at all. I was the only one out there really marketing outside of like Carl King with his electrolyte capsules, like Succeed or whatever.
Oh yeah. Is that the S or was it S?
No, that was Succeed.
Oh yeah. What was the other? All right. Keep going.
Succeed was the only thing at the time. Like, I mean, I can remember eating potato chip with a salt and feeling the water go out of my stomach, and then going to GNC and buying salt tablets for my races. That's kind of what was going on in that early competitive range of the sport. But Carl had these Succeed capsules and drink that were the first ones to kind of advertise in Ultra Running Magazine. But from a shoe perspective, we were the ones paying some attention to the sport outside of Ann, and some Nike attention that she got, of course. And in Rockport with the Tara Humarans, and Rockport wasn't hard to,
that was quite the bar was set quite low on that one. Yeah.
Quite low. And like with Tim, he just loved the interaction with the development of the product and loved to engage with a brand. And every time I'd be in California, he'd want to go for a run and discuss shoe technology. And so that was Tim's big tie-in, was just the ability to, kind of state what he liked and have a brand listen to him and execute it in the next shoe that comes out. And with Scott Jurek, I knew I had to give him, a bit more as this young guy. But Patagonia came on board, and we were able to create a little bit of a budget. So it was clothing and it was shoes. And then what I would do is would get Scott into a race like at Way Too Cool, Greg Sotto would say, sure, I'll give him an entry, bring him along. And we'd go like, literally, we were boiling potatoes in Greg's garage, running the race, setting up a tent. And then at the end of the finish line, we're handing out water bottles that have the logo Way Too Cool that was given to me by Dana from Ultimate Direction. And I'd literally like pay for Scott's travel, which was sleeping in the dirt the whole time. He didn't mind that. I'd pick him up and pay for his food, and he'd help me promote the shoes. And with Ben, we actually did give him, a stipend. He actually got some money with his One Sport contract, but was the only one at the time. And then I started to formalize a little bit of a financial budget for Scott in Luann Park and maybe like 3 or 4 others that came from me and Patagonia. And then it was kind of neat because then after the trade of the sport started to really pick up some steam and other brands started to give it some recognition, ACG came up with a team in North Face. Like really it was me and Scott out there. Then all of a sudden there was Dean and Topher showing up at races together, promoting the North Face, which was kind of cool, and getting to know those guys at that, kind of as brothers in arms, so to speak. And then Vass came out with a team, and this money kind of came into the sport, and Montrail sales just kind of built right underneath it. Because my whole concept with the team was, this is a way we can generate a lifestyle and, like you said, this camaraderie and get this commitment with people with our, personal support, my personal support, pacing them and helping them travel and getting them into races and helping race directors mark course and get prizes and things like that. And at the time, that was enough to make a big impact. And with Montrail and Patagonia together, in speaking of Nancy Hobbs, I got involved with USATF, and I was able to come up with a bit of a prize package for the first national championships, which was out at Kettle Moraine, and then took it over as national championships at White River in 1999, and actually had a $10,000 prize purse, which was the first notable prize money event in 99 at White River, with $10,000 in prize money and place to stay and all that kind of stuff. And so I think people really appreciated my personal commitment to the sport, the brand, the individual. And then we were able to bring in some small things, travel and shoes and gear. And then pretty soon, as the Montrail, then Seattle Running Company person, helping to develop the interaction within USA Track and Field, and helping to come up with selection processes for national events that then would have prize money. And so we brought, a fair amount to the table in that 98, 99, 2000 timeframe, just from an organizational perspective as well. And a lot of it was my own personal work, but then it was Montrail's willingness and the culture there at Montrail that really helped support that. And then you team up with Jeannie Wall at Patagonia. And at the time it was a Dana Miller at Ultimate Direction. And, we could kind of get together a little package for athletes and expand our support.
And it's cool in terms of, I think, what you were able to do. And in terms of, so you mentioned like Tim would weigh in on maybe like shoe design. And it's kind of funny to think back. I remember thinking of what technology to bring in some of those early models. And I've tried hard. I've tried to scour, like I found some like just retro shoes just to have back here when I started doing more like shoe reviews or whatever, like a first generation, like Adidas Marathon, like TR, and like some of the early ones. And I tried to find something from One Sport. I tried to find something in some of the early Montrail models, and I just came up short. And I don't have any of those, unfortunately, still around. But I remember thinking the Hard Rock was such a cool shoe when it came out. But like in hindsight, I think it was probably like a brick in terms of like, comparing it to like today's standards. So
that wasn't my shoe.
Yeah, I knew I remember, was it the Leona Divide maybe had a little bit more light
Yeah.
flex to it, and then they started
Yeah.
getting lighter and more minimal or whatever. But all that's to say, when you were creating these models, it's cool that you all as a brand were able to represent and tie together really the full US trail space at that point in terms of what you were just naming the shoes.
Yeah,
with
no,
the
so
hard
those, you know, the names of the shoes were events that I had approached and made a relationship with. So we started the events that were showing us the most support in the beginning were the ones that we were naming, you know, the shoes after. The Diaz Vista preceded the Hard Rock, and that was, you know, the Diaz Vista was the 50K up in Vancouver, BC. That was like the second or third race I had run, and so that was cool support up there. And we got to know the Canadian distributors and get some Canadian athletes on board. And the Mountain Masochist, of course, through the connection I made with David Horton at the time, and the Leona Divide. That was one that Ben Hyen had me and Dave Terry come out to, and we got to know Beverly Kimberly really well, and Hal. What was Hal's? Spacing Hal's last name, but he was
Koerner, you mean?
No, not Hal Koerner. No.
Oh, sorry.
The race director at Leona Divide, who
I
had
didn't know
originally
him.
been involved in the Angeles Crest race, and so, you know, then we named that next shoe after the Leona Divide event because they were super supportive of the brand, and so that was neat. You know, that helped bring some kind of pride to a certain shoe.
Totally.
From the regional space, and we used those folks in that support to open running shoe stores in Montrail, and that's how it went. You know, I created a demand, and then the stores fell into place after that. But the main thing, you know, with the technology, I mean, the Vitesse preceded all of those. And if you go to 94 or 95, and the Vitesse was the one sport shoe coming in onto the market, it was completely what I was looking for, which was a shoe that weighed, you know, 10 ounces or less, had good cushioning, was using EVA, but we used this TPU or polyurethane protection plate that kept, you know, the deflected sharp stuff from coming up and bruising the foot, which nobody else had a protection plate at that time, unless it was a hiking shoe. And then a little bit of a polycarbonate toe box, so it kept you from stubbing your toes. And then a little bit of an outrigger, kind of the foam piece kind of was a little bit of an outrigger laterally, which made the shoe super stable. And I used to grind that thing a little bit of an angle so it would hold on a side hill for me and keep me on a more neutral plane. And then a super hydrophobic upper that just dispelled all the water when you went in and out of a creek. And the other shoes had a lot of foam in them. They didn't have the protection in them. You know, Adidas had the Response Trail at the time. Asics had a trail running shoe out there, but with the protection that combined the hydrophobicness, the stability underfoot, particularly laterally, that Vitesse was pretty revolutionary. And you'd look at it now and think,
yeah, but at the time, right.
No,
and
it even had notches in the protection plate at the med heads. You know, Scott Tucker was a very smart production manager and went on to run the Scott Shoe division, and then got hired away to Pearl Izumi, opening the door for me to go into Scott there. But Scott Tucker was the president and the production manager at Montrail at the time that the Vitesse came out, and still is designing shoes to this day. And so, so it was kind of neat to see him, you know, break on at that level and then continue his kind of foyer into the running world as well. But
yeah,
that was pretty there wasn't another shoe like it at the time. And I would say the next closest shoe came with the Melee and the Leona Divide out of Montrail, which were still runnable and light, not the Hard Rock. The Hard Rock to me was more of a hiking shoe or a Hard Rock shoe.
Which right fit with Hard Rock, right? I mean, it was right.
That was
Yeah.
kind of the idea with it. And then of course, other brands started paying attention, and I at Seattle Running Company was involved with several other shoes for other brands. It was me and Trip Allen sitting in the back room at Seattle Running Company that came up with the rounded heel on the Cascadia and the pivot posting on the original Cascadia. That was myself and Trip Allen, who was the future concept designer at Brooks at the time. And then I also worked with ASICS, and me and Terry Shallow designed the Trail Attack, which is their, kind of taking a cross country shoe into the 50K world. And so other brands started to pay attention and actually came and sought me out a little bit to kind of get some input on what they should do to make a true trail running shoe. And particularly the Cascadia was quite a successful shoe, and competed really, that ACG, Vast started making some really good shoes. But it was, that was 4 or 5 years after the Vitesse.
And it's interesting, even in that time, that you were still making the shoes, though, that your athletes and people at large would run in, right? It was kind of the joke early on, and on how long it lasted, that you had some of the players like North Face, once they would enter into the space, they were making footwear, but it was like what was it like in the contract where their athletes didn't even have to like race in their shoes just because I don't know, the shoes maybe weren't that good. I don't think I may have owned a pair like early on, but they just weren't quite at the same level. I don't think I don't remember if I had a pair of Trail Attacks early on. But you were making shoes that actually people wanted to run in, and they felt fairly advanced. I think there's an early pair of the Cascadias, I think down here.
That's the one right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. See that little red piece?
Yep.
So it was kind of that one. And then the red piece on the other side, on the inside too. Those are the pivot posts. And Platja and Halberstadt at Boulder Running Company at the time, they were insisting to Brooks that trail running shoes should be medially posted. And me and Scott Jurek over at Seattle Running Company, they were Boulder Running Company, we were Seattle Running Company, we're telling Brooks, no, they got to be neutral. If it's harder on the inside, softer on the outside, it's going to laterally release. You can't hammer it. And so because of those two meetings, Trip Allen had the meeting with Johnny Halberstadt at Boulder Running Company. And then with me and Scott, him and I sat there and came up with the idea, well, let's do a post, but let's make it neutrally posted. So you have the support in both directions. And then actually Boulder Running Company liked the idea of the Cascadia and like that. And so it was interesting to see how the other brands took the information and moved the technology forward. Like the Cascadia, the rounded heel and that pivot post, that moved the technology forward as far as the product on our feet there. So,
and so you have referenced Seattle Running Company there a bit. So let's go there. So Seattle Running, I can't remember. Was that a Fleet Feet before you?
It was a Foot Zone.
It was a Foot Zone. That was it. Yep.
It was a Foot Zone, and they had 9 stores in the Northwest, one in Bend, one in Seattle, a couple in Bellevue and Kirkland, and at the time I was selling Montrail to the Foot Zone stores, and I was kind of looking for, I don't know, I was looking for a better way to even have a tighter community. And I had this huge retail background from a previous life at Nordstrom, which is in my wheelhouse. And I'm back doing some serious retail again now at the Smiley Creek Lodge. But, Seattle was just the prime spot for trail running, for training. And the main reason is the year-round access to big climbs and big descents. You're not snowbound. You're running, 4-mile, 3,800 foot climbs at Mount Si from sea level up, and so, and Scott Jurek and Ian Torrance and William Emerson, Brandon Sobrowski, they all saw that, and they all came to work at Seattle Running Company when I opened the store. And so I saw the opportunity with Foot Zone due to my connection with Montrail, and the Seattle store was ripe for the picking. And so my wife, Leslie, and I decided we would open a retail store together. And she was getting pretty well-versed in massage therapy. And Scott Jurek had finished up and was ready to move from South Dakota and start practicing PT, and had a retail background as well. And so I jumped on that opportunity in 99. And pretty soon we had this great following that was moving to Seattle, showing up at the store, living in my basement, working at the store, training together. I continued with Montrail for about a year for overlapping the marketing there and owning the store, but I couldn't continue that because we started getting into managing events and all sorts of stuff, which I can kind of expand on. But and so we became a really strong Montrail account, but we based our business off of trail running. And it became kind of this spot to come. And I was getting involved with USA Track and Field at the time, and actually became the World 100K coach in 2003, and had, I think, 3 or 4 Seattle Running Club members that went to the World 100K over those years. And so through that USATF piece and picking up White River 50, we created that national championship event and the prize money. And Seattle Running Company then, with the crowd that I had, this group of runners that were all ex-Montrail athletes, I started putting on events, trail running events. And we were probably up to about 8 events at one point there. And which include White River 50, started this Cougar Mountain Trail Running Series, the Bridle Trails event. And so we decided, we need a way to kind of manage these events in a more community way. And so we created the Seattle Running Club, which became about 320 members. And next thing I know, we had this ultra running team. We had these events. I was taking high school age kids to nationals for Seattle Running Company for cross country, and competing in the cross country events within USA Track and Field. We got 8th one year at national team championships with Seattle Running Club. And
Seattle's still stellar in terms of the youth cross country running. I mean,
yeah, no doubt about it.
Really strong.
But it really became this really strong community in the Seattle area, in kind of a national community for trail running. At one point, like with Chrissy, for instance, we were the launching point of several careers, as well as, these people who had been on the Montrail team coming to work and train together. Hal Koerner moved there. I met him when he was about 19. I met Scott when he was about 20. Ian took my position down at Montrail, and Uli Steidl showed up and started training with Scott and Hal. And then Chrissy walked into the store looking for her summer job, fresh out of college. And me and Jurek were standing there. We literally hired her in the moment.
Uh-huh.
And she became our manager at the store. And eventually, after Ian left, I think 2 years later, maybe even at least 2 years later, then Chrissy got that job down at Montrail. But it took us a year and a half to get Chrissy to even go out and run with Scott and I on the trails. And then it was all over. She just became, an amazing trail runner and hooked on the sport, and is who she is today because of that atmosphere and that community that we had there, at the store.
Which is cool. And that was going to be part of here too, the butterfly effects that spun off of what you had an instrumental hand in there, what coalesced there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
What Jurek would end up doing for the sport as a whole, as in just times, performances, and an ambassador. nationwide, some of the FKTs, what Hal would go off and do, and both as one of that generation's top runners out there, and then with his own shop and his own community spinning off of that. Chrissy, who you mentioned, like there's so many Ian, right, in terms of like coaching, the number of individuals that he's continued to have a hand in shaping out there, and then the communities around him. Like it's just awesome how that then kind of spread out and where that all went as tentacles, basically.
Yeah, it kind of continued on after that too. Like, so Hal and I, we almost opened a store together in Kirkland, and I ended up, and it ended up not working out. So as far as opening another store in the Seattle area, but I had been coming back from Western States, and I stayed in Ashland, and I came back and I'm like, Hal, you got to go to Ashland, dude. You can run right out of this town. It doesn't have a running shoe store there. And so Hal went to Ashland and opened a store. And now other employees, I had Eric Satz was an employee. He had the Balanced Athlete, which is, I think he's Fleet Feet now, but, Jonathan Bernard has Ohio Valley Running Company now. Phil Kochek that worked for us for 5 years. He has Seven Hills Run Shop. And who else owns a shop now that worked at the store? Well, Brian Morrison got put into the position to take over the Fleet Feet shops after we sold the store to Fleet Feet. So now Brian Morrison is also there. So, we had this, I don't know, I must have fooled him into thinking that owning a shop was a good idea, but
well, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that would be a whole.
And of course, then there's you, of course.
Yeah,
right?
I guess it would be a whole separate tangent. I was just on the periphery. I think when I moved in there and started working with a friend from college down at the New Balance store. But right, I think the first time I met you was at Cascade Crest, and I think you were just hanging out with your dog. I can't remember whether you were working at an aid station or crewing.
Well, I was at Olali Meadows for 20 years. So I definitely was I was
working it.
For the 1 year I ran it, and my wife did the aid station. But,
this year, I think you were crewing. So I think I remember you hanging out, and then Chrissy was kind of hanging out there too. And it went from there. But so I felt like I was always on the periphery, and I don't know, life goes the way
you were
life
part of that crowd. You showed up and started doing the runs, and, we got to, talk a bit. You were down working the New Balance store at Seattle. I remember at the Seattle Marathon Expo talking to you down there. And
totally right. So I was kind of around it, but of all the, and who knows, I mean, things go the way they go, but it would have been interesting to know how it would have been shaped differently if I, instead of going into New Balance Seattle, I would have gone to Fleet Feet, or Seattle Running Company, and be like, hey, can I work here like a bit? And I don't know. It was, I don't know. Anyway,
I would have hired you in a heartbeat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Who knows where life would have gone from there. But it was definitely a cool time, and it was inspirational to see all that going down in that pod, like at the moment, or in that moment.
It was fun. And I definitely have fond memories of you in that time. And it was cool when you were opening your shop and calling me up. That was great. I enjoyed those conversations.
There was in some of the prior Roots episodes here, I had, let me see if I can actually pull it up. I was going through and looking for photos because I think it's fun to sift back through. And I actually started, I think, maybe a couple of years, but then I abandoned it because I was just going to go some questions with you. But there was one here that actually, and I just thought of it because in this moment, like looking back, it seemed like such a young time, I guess, in terms of how things were coming on. And it's just a much different world now. But like one of the photos I'll share with you here.
I'm going to grab a light. It's getting dark in my room.
Totally.
There we go. Now you can see me again.
So was that photo there, which I think just speaks to, it was a younger time, and it was still so much that would come like after those years. And and that just kind of speaks to kind of that pod. But looking at that, I imagine it brings back a lot of those memories for you.
Yeah, that's my Eurovan in the background there, which a lot of people rode in to go to trail runs over the years. And of course, that's at the start and finish line at White River 50. And I'm trying to think if that preceded those guys moving to Seattle.
This was, I tagged it as 2003. I'm not sure whether that was accurate or not. But
no, Ian was, Hal was, both Hal and Scott were at Seattle Running Company at the time. Ian, I think, was down at Montrail, and Godale. I got to know him a little bit through the World 100K team and the USATF stuff, because he was a big advocate for integrating ultra running and USA track and field, because he was always on the World 100K team at that time, and was one of the guys that we always brought out to White River. And yeah, that's classic. What it was like most days at Seattle Running Company right there.
Which is awesome. So it is fun to think back, and I think very affectionately, even if I was on that only on the periphery. Let me get back here to the note. So I guess taking us there to White River 50. White River 50, I couldn't remember whether you had started that one or took it over, but it was going ahead of you, and then you moved in as RD on that one.
Yeah. So Chris Ralph started the race. I think there was actually, I believe in 93, I think, was the first year that White River was run. And then I ran it in 95 when I was the One Sport rep with Dave and Paul Terry. And then I got involved in one of the aid stations for a couple of years at helping Chris out. And then when in 99, right after we opened Seattle Running Company, she's like, this event needs you. it needs to move to this next level, and I want you to take it over. And so that was immediately, I utilized those inroads at USA Track and Field and the support with Patagonia and some other brands, and was able to come up with the prize money and really create a legitimate national championship event with a friend of mine, Charlie, at a video company. And we made it onto a late night Fox Sports show called Marathons and Beyond. I think it was related to that magazine.
What kind of crazy show is that on Fox? They need to.
And it was on, it was the 2 years, the first 2 years, we sold video footage that was aired on Fox Sports. Marathons Plus, I think, was the show. And I was able to house all those people and bring all those people together in 99. So that's the year I took it, that my wife and I took it over, Leslie and I took it over. And it went from, I think, 64 participants the year previous to like 184 that first year, which was a pretty big number at the time.
Yeah, for the trail scene, especially for 50 mile.
Yeah. And then we kind of settled in at we kind of hit this point before James took it over where we were almost at 400 runners. And it became one of the oldest classic, still is, events in the country, for sure. It was one of the original, like, small handful of races out there, that at the time. And even in 95, there weren't a whole lot of other races to choose from necessarily, around
And that
particularly.
became a model. I know for me, that became my model for Cayuga Trails, emulating the experience and going after the national championship and looking at what your purse was and whether it was okay to apply if Scott were still wanting to hang on to the championship. And I'm sure for other people as well. I'm guessing to a certain extent, was it Hal created Siskiyou Outback, or he took that over?
Yeah.
Was that, I can't remember where that was already going. But I imagine you could follow also your model there that was then emulated, because that was it was melding the kind of this classic ultra space with the evolution of the sport in some high-powered runners, some purses, the competition value, these beautiful courses. Like there was so much that came together in that one. And yes, there were for sure classics, other classics out there going as well, but that was for sure one that was one of the signature events.
Yeah, and you know, it's neat to see both. It was neat to see both you and Hal, not just emulating maybe White River at your events, but with our communities and the way we interacted with our communities through the stores. Because you know, Hal was at Seattle Running Company, and he was always out there huffing it, helping me put events on. And you saw that happening at Seattle Running Company, where we started putting these trail running events and these Sunday runs and taking people out to the mountains, and you know, and so it was cool to see both you guys creating those communities, which was similar to what we had been doing. And that, you know, that in and of itself is such good, healthy growth for the sport of trail running, because it just builds these strong bonds in our communities, and a place for people to come and learn and experience the sport. And so that's a really cool thing to see with you guys.
So let's jump. There was the Scott Sports to one of your next chapters, and this was you're on and off a little bit with Scott, and you had mentioned how you wove in on the heels of Scott Tucker when he went over to Pearl, and I remember meeting with Scott too, and he was with Pearl at like one of the events or whatever, and so Scott Sports. Sorry, I can get my bearings here. You're on and off part of your career. Yeah, tying in Scott Tucker, the Montrail years, one which you had a really active hand in, but with your hands, I think a bit tied in terms of how much you were really able to do with Scott Sports. Where and what do you see as a relative downfall of Montrail around in those years, and what would those changes of constraints speak to some of the difficulties that you were also having with Scott? Like, I guess, how are the footwear brands changing? Like, where did Montrail go in those years, and what were your challenges with Scott Sports, where you had maybe a certain vision of what you could have done with it, if you could have done with it? Yeah,
and you know, I think it has a lot to do with commitment and passion, and the lack thereof. Not in my case, but you know. And not in Scott Tucker's case with Montrail and whatnot, but in Columbia's case, you know, Scott Tucker did go to Columbia from when Montrail sold to Columbia as the production manager. And I remember him telling me that, you know, the volume of some of the Columbian shoes were more than the whole Montrail brand in one single model that was going to the Walmart store and that kind of stuff. And he would bring these new design ideas to you know, someone who could do the drawings of the shoes and stuff like that. And he would get so far down underneath this pile of crappy shoes that generated so much more money that it became super frustrating to him. And so that's where, you know, I think, and then Scott Tucker left the Columbia Montrail brand, and then all the compassion and commitment was gone when Tucker left. It got a little bit of a boost back when Topher came back into the scene, because Topher's, you know, he had put his passion and his commitment into the North Face programs. And yeah, I know you hadn't run on their shoes, but they're a clothing brand. They're a really strong clothing brand. Their clothes they got great stuff. And that was, you know, what I think was there. Of course, they wanted to have good, you know, Topher wanted to have good shoes, but again, he's one guy in this pool of people that where there's so much more dollars going into these other categories for them that they weren't putting that commitment and passion into the development of the shoes, but they were in the clothing. And so when Topher came back into Montrail, there was a little bit of a boost again there. I think, but at the same time, it was still kind of buried under these other pages, so to speak, within the Columbia world. And, you know, and then they folded the brand, and then they weren't going to fold the brand. And then it became Montrail Columbia to try to boost the Columbia name's technical prowess. And so things got a little mucked up and lost in the translation. And it's Scott Sports, you know, I mean, the main governing body, or the owner of Scott, is in Switzerland, and they're the number 2 bike brand over there. Their ski business is off the charts over there. And in the US, they were mainly a ski pole and goggle brand. They brought the aluminum ski pole to the world market, and their ski business was driving the business, and bike was actually a bigger volume in the US, but not quite like in Switzerland. And Larry, who brought me on, was pretty committed to the shoes, and they had this geometry that was just amazing. You put the shoe on and you ran in it, and you could feel the smooth, accelerated transition of the geometry of the brand. And from a pure running standpoint, they totally had something there. And what happened was they brought in a bike guy to run what was a ski company that had been in Sun Valley since 1956. And this bike guy from Specialized moved the brand to Salt Lake City. So it lost its heritage. It lost its roots. He wanted to focus on bike, and shoes weren't in his original plan. And so the people making the decisions didn't have that passion and commitment to the footwear, regardless of how good the geometry and the technology was. And at first, I mean, the first few years after I moved to Ketchum in the Sun Valley area, I was working for Scott with the support that Larry was giving me, and I was jointly promoting at the Hawaii Ironman, because that's what it was. It was it was geometry that was meant to race triathlons on tired legs, you know. And so we had great impacts within that triathlon world, and huge impact at the Hawaii Ironman. And then when they changed direction in who was running the U.S. operations, and the commitment went to bike, and they left the mountains, although Salt Lake, some people will say, is the mountains, but not compared to where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so they kind of lost that commitment and passion. And I had 93 active accounts, including Roadrunner Sports, REI, and a bunch of specialty accounts, including you. And they basically kind of, in a way, talked me into becoming a rep again. And a year later, the owner in Switzerland, Bayat, kind of put me back in, and there was only 12 accounts left out of 93, like 2 years later. And I was, at that point, I was fighting a losing battle with Scott from a business standpoint, not from a technology standpoint at all. You know, and the development went away from the guys in Portland who developed the technology, the geometry, had the ties into Biomechanica that did the geometry on the Sub 2 shoe for Nike, which was actually Simon who did the original work. He's involved with Biomechanica on that geometry and that original T2 and Polani, which I think carried over into the geometry in that shoe.
Yeah.
But coming back into it, I was kind of plugged into a position, and I was the one man show. I was the marketing director, the sales manager, I swept the floors and cleaned the bathrooms too. So, and after about 3 years of kind of making a run at it, then I decided, you know what, it's just kind of fighting a losing battle. But I mean, the technology was there. I opened REI. I opened REI 3 times and Roadrunner Sports 3 times, including just recently with Roadrunner Sports for them again with they're reintroducing in the U.S. again now, with similar technology to what you've just seen recently. But
so when I think of the then brands and putting this together again, where we've come from, where we're at now, where things could go from here. One Sport, then transitioning into Montrail, was really making it in a much smaller community space at that point, and with a dedicated trail brand. And now it's a much bigger market, but you see brands that, I guess, to a certain extent, try, like you look at Salomon, for example. Salomon, I don't know how much money they pumped into trying to make their brand really viable in the U.S. market. And I totally appreciated their support. They were everywhere, pervasive, supporting events, trying to support retailers, but they just couldn't really get off the ground. So now they're, I think, waffling and trying to move forward into this maybe based on like road shoes and decreasing their focus as just like a trail brand. Why do you think and granted, there's so many more brands that are doing decent trail shoes now. Like every brand has a lineup of trail shoes. So I'm going to guess maybe that's the answer, is there's so many more brands with so many more, there's just so much more competition. But do you think it's just not viable, or in the case of like Salomon playing it out, where it's just not viable to make it even in a much bigger community as just a trail brand?
Well, I think there's economies of scale, of course, and return on your investment, which was a big thing with Scott. I mean, with the amount of bike business they're doing, every dollar they didn't put into bike, they went into shoe was not going into where their bread and butter was, which was bike and ski. And so they would kind of pull back on it. And then they'd say, well, Europe's doing it okay, and they're doing okay with it. Let's try it a little bit again. And it would kind of spit and sputter, and then they'd pull back again a little bit. And I think with Salomon, I mean, they have some big categories of sales. They're real big in the ski world and the Nordic world. And again, like with Scott, I mean, Europe is a big market for them, and now there's China. And so the US becomes a little less important for where they direct, a lot of their support. And I think Salomon has a lot of worldwide business going on outside of the trail running side of things, that create a lot of volume for them, soft goods and their ski categories. And so then they'll pull back their marketing a little bit. They'll look at, what can we do to actually make this a more viable, higher volume percentage of contribution to sales within our mix of the brand. And so these bigger companies like that have all these other categories, I think they struggle when they see the volume that a Nike is doing in the road range and think that, we should be doing that kind of volume. But it just, it wasn't there originally in trail running because it was a small sport for those bigger brands. But now there's so much more competition with Hoka and Ultra and these other brands that also have a lot of marketing prowess, that the slice of the pie is split up again. So you haven't seen this huge increase in return on your investment for a brand like Salomon. And so then they start looking to the road market where there's a lot more customers to grab. But it's also a lot more expensive and a lot harder to break into. With Montrail, trail running was the bigger category. So they were a hiking brand that was just doing 3.2 million in hiking sales or whatever as one sport. And all of a sudden trail running took off, and it became their higher volume category than their hiking shoes. And so the commitment and the compassion all went just into that, developing the trail aspect. It wasn't diluted into other categories that created higher volume of sales for them. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's just like, I remember it was a battle to get the Cascadia going with Brooks because they're making so much money with the Beast and the adrenaline.
Well, it's still a battle, I think, with
it is.
With Brooks. I mean, it's such a big company, been the number one player in at least the run specialty market for so long. Such a big space. They're so capable. But even I think caught up with Adam Chase by phone I don't know, a few weeks or a month or so ago or whatever.
Stop real quick. Do you
Yeah,
know
totally.
that Adam Chase was one of my one sport athletes?
Oh no, yeah.
He was one of the earliest members. Him and Dave Mackey were my Colorado, along with Kirk Apt, and those three were one sport athletes, and continue on as Montrail athletes. Just a side note.
And he's one that's also been all over kind of the history of these communities as well. Like kind of there's Adam Chase, or there's Adam Chase.
Yeah, he's great.
Woven everywhere.
Really cool. Yeah.
But working in the work that he's doing in the association that he has with Brooks, just seeing if they'd like to, for instance, come on and support Whiteface as being the U.S. Mountain Running Championships this year, which I was grateful for your support and Scott's support in the years that you were able to, and in Cayuga. But for being such a the brand size that they are, and I feel like they're capable of, I feel like they've been very still gun shy, like in the trail space. They have the Catamount, which I really liked, the newer trail shoe, but the Cascadia now is just kind of which I'm actually wearing on my foot right now, is comparatively speaking, kind of a chunky shoe at this point. And so it's interesting to see such a big brand that's still in that Northwest, that would be in a hotbed, still not be willing to commit the resources into really giving a go at what the trail space could do, I guess.
Yeah, they with Seattle Running Club and Brooks being right there, and Jurek, when Tripp and I were working on the Cascadia, I said, when you get this shoe to come out, I know Scott Jurek is, his contract at Montrail is coming up here soon. I said, you really need Scott Jurek to be a spokesperson for the shoe, and you got to toe the line. And he did, and he got them. And then Scott was able to make an impact at Brooks because he would put so much commitment into what he did there. And so it was a challenge to get Brooks to put money into getting Scott on the Cascadia and promoting that shoe. But it was super successful. And Scott, I'm not sure if he's working with Brooks anymore, but he did for years. And but again, it was that challenge. And Brooks supported Seattle Running Club in our store too, and they gave us way more stuff for our cross country and road running team. They outfitted a team of 24 runners, gave me shirts for all my events, gave travel money to people who would make national teams from a road perspective, but not on that trail side, even though we were that trail running store. And so that right there, with my top brand, Brooks, like I said, they would throw all sorts of road running support into our club and in what we were doing, but not nearly as much, except for Scott, into the trail side of it with us.
I think that's so intriguing. It would be a brand that would be so capable.
Yeah, I could never get him on board for White River 50 and stuff as a sponsor, but to get a whole bunch of money for 24 people for cross country nationals and stuff, they were all in.
No problem.
So it was interesting. From that perspective.
I think Chase is trying to put on with them a trail event in the Seattle area, I think this next year. And I think that's whatever resources they have for the most part. I think they're putting it into that event. So I think Chase is eating it all up. But in any case, all right, we'll try to get in a wind down pattern here. You're an integral part of trail running community and brands in the U.S. for over 2 decades, and it was no doubt consuming. You were firing on all fronts. You were everywhere in the space. How's it feel to be a year into a new chapter, which is the Smiley Creek Lodge? And tell us a bit about the lodge and what you got going on.
Yeah, this area, Sun Valley, Ketchum, Sawtooth, White Clouds, Pioneers, the headwaters of the Salmon. If you've been here, it'll blow your mind. It's one of the most understated, undervalued, most intense mountainous environments you can find anywhere. And the way the air smells and everything, it's amazing. In Sun Valley, my life, despite the trail running world, always revolved around skiing and ski racing. And then I started backcountry skiing, tying my skiing and my trail running together, and just going into these remote places. But ever since 4th grade, the the history of skiing in Sun Valley is huge. First destination resort in 1930s, first backcountry hut built in 1934 in the Pioneer cabin. The first chairlift in the world was developed here. And I since fourth grade, when my parents brought me here and bought a condo here with 3 other families, I always wanted to live here. I would kick and scream and cry every time we went back to Seattle. And, even at Seattle Running Company, part of our club was a City League ski racing team. And I had like 3X World Cup ski racers, and Wednesday night at Alpental, Seattle Running Company ski team, but when Scott Tucker said he had moved here with his son for Nordic training and was working with Scott Sports in the shoes, I immediately kind of attached myself to being the rep because we were selling the store. And then the opportunity for me to actually get moved to my childhood dream by a company that was making shoes and was a ski company was a dream. It was winning the lottery, and it was great because I avoided working in the ski industries until the last 2 years, and I was working, which allowed me to ski in the ski season. As soon as I started working in the ski industry, my skiing started to go back down again. And then after I finished up with Scott Sports, I started to work a couple of retail jobs. I was still putting on White River, and I started working with a local dirt bike event here. And then 2 friends of mine who are world famous guides, were World Cup ski racers, won the X Games in the skier cross 3 years in a row. Their names are Zach and Reggie Christ. Zach owns Sun Valley Guides, and Reggie does helicopter guiding all over the world, and became really close friends of mine through skiing. They ended up buying this place called Smiley Creek Lodge. It's 42 miles from Sun Valley, 28 miles from Stanley, right at the headwaters of the Salmon River. And the Salmon River is, I believe, the last uninterrupted natural flow of river in the United States outside of Alaska. And Smiley Creek Lodge sits right where these 3 big lakes that feed the Salmon River, Redfish, Alturas, and Pettit. And it's this funky old lodge that's been there since the 70s that has an RV park. It has a couple teepees, a couple of yurts, a couple of tents, and a couple cabins, and this really rustic old lodge. And they do snowmobiles in the wintertime. It's surrounded by the Sawtooth, the Smokies, the Boulders, and the White Clouds. And then the headwaters of the Salmon River spilling out into some of the best river rafting in the world, down the Middle Fork and Salmon. And so Reggie and Zach bought this out of a labor of love and then hired me to run it because I had the retail background. I have the backcountry background. I've worked with guides over the years, and the backcountry skiing, I know the area really well. But all of a sudden, I'm an underground tank storage facility certified specialist at a gas station, and I'm running a restaurant, and I'm fixing RV hookups, and then we've got a retail store. So we got a full service restaurant, a retail store, gas pumps, small grocery with a parlor. In the parlor, will pump out 200 plus milkshakes on a Saturday in July. And then we have, we're doing a remodel to the RV site, which was 17 RV sites. We're going to turn it into 10, and we're bringing in these mobile tiny home units that'll allow us to have year-round rentals in 7 of the RV sites. And then the snowmobile thing, I've always been a silent traveler through the mountains, and all of a sudden I'm
loving the snowmobile. I saw one of your posts recently.
Yeah, this huge snowmobile business with 26 snowmobiles and 5 guides and the lodge, and it's a cool experience. It suits my have to do 10 things at a time kind of demeanor really well. And So yeah, it's kind of a neat place. It'd be a really cool place to have some trail running stuff go on too.
I was just gonna say, I mean, that was such a huge part of you for so long. There's got to be some part of you that's thinking, I could probably put on a 50 mile from here, or 50K, or 100 mile, or something out of the Smiley Creek Lodge.
I've got some routes that I've already over the years of, 100 miler in the piles, which I think actually Ben, who puts on Stanhope 60K, has got a 100-mile course in the Pioneer Range now that he's started this last year. But it would be an amazing destination travel spot for trail runners. The best use of that space up there would be, having the accommodations in the lodge and running right out of the lodge and the lakes. It'd be the perfect place for, clinics or a destination kind of travel trail running kind of scenario. Events maybe, but I kind of gotten out of the event scene with James taking over White River 2 years ago. But yeah, who knows? And the fact that I'm so entrenched in this ski world now and whatnot, it's doing it for me pretty good. I can survive either in the ski world or the trail running world. They both make me really happy. So,
well, that's good. That's good to hear. When you said in maybe one of your text or messages that you were just working your butt off, it's good that you're so consumed and in a happy place and someplace that you had always wanted to be physically. I'm guessing your family is doing pretty well and stoked out there as well. Hopefully
they are. Yeah, they are. The only downside is I'm not dealing with designing footwear anymore. So
well, I don't know.
I do like shoes.
You never know what'll come. I mean, maybe that could still be hashed out. But and you're again such a foundational figure, like in the space, and such a person that's connected to so many. I mean, I guess even if it would just sound fun, even if it's not in the context of a formal event, dude, why don't you just like put out invites like we're having a anybody connected in this Seattle running company, whatever, just come on back in this weekend at the Smiley Creek Lodge and just meet for this kind of old school rendezvous of just friends and hanging out or running or whatever. I mean,
that's a great idea. I kind of have a little bit of the same vision. I was thinking we could even have the Trail Running Film Festival do outdoor movies in the RV park for a fall get together or.
And maybe that would be a whole lot less, because as we both know, putting on an event is just wicked stressful and it's draining and it's
cool though, right?
It is. Oh, right. There's still so many positive angles to it, but it's a lot and it's stressful. And if you're in a good spot, you're dealing with so many things. But just putting on basically like a larger party of friends or watching some films or whatever, maybe that kind of meets in the middle. And if I can. If I see somebody else post on when they're going there and I hop on that train, dude, I'd go out there and join that.
You'll get the invite. Don't worry.
It's good. Anything else that would be fun to mention that maybe we didn't get into while I've got you on the hook here for talking about where we've come from and or kind of any visions on where things are headed if you want to weigh in there, and it's okay if not.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about, I haven't been to a running event for a long time. And, it's probably been 3 years since I was running the Stanhope here and bringing Scott shoes up to give away. And, but it still feels the same in a lot of ways. I mean, the trail running community has such a good core values and appreciation for the outdoors for the most part, even though it's grown. It just seems it's almost overwhelming how many events there are out there. It almost makes my head spin now. Yeah. And it's kind of funny just to meet some young, and I have been, with the Scott scene, I've been involved with Morgan Aratola and Cody Lind, some of the really strong current racers and whatnot. So I've still had a hand in supporting, Joe. I guess Joe Gray's getting older now, but Joe and Sage Canadian and those guys. that was my last generation of actually supporting athletes through Scott Sports. And that's one of my favorite parts. I'd say that's one of the things I miss the most is working with athletes, supporting them, running with them, testing shoes and applying, taking their input and actually doing something with it. And that's probably one of the things I really enjoyed the most, was working with athletes and runners. And so I don't know if that doesn't really answer your question,
right.
so to speak, but yeah,
Yeah, right on. All right. Well, it is so good to hear your voice. It's good to see your face. I'm glad that you are totally consumed and doing well. And it would be awesome to get out there and see your new life at this point at somewhere, or somehow twist your arm. And if you're ever coming this way, to reconnect as well.
I will be, actually. My son's going to St. Lawrence.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah. So I was there visiting the school, but I'll be out your way. I'll call you next time I come.
St. Lawrence. Why
Yeah.
St. Lawrence? What's he doing in St. Lawrence?
A lot of it has to do with their outdoor leadership programs.
Okay.
He's really big into guiding and backcountry skiing and ski racing. They have a big ski racing program, and he can spend a semester living off the grid in a yurt in the Adirondacks, studying environmental science. And
Uh-huh.
a lot of it has to do with their outdoor leadership programs there.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Well, maybe one of these years when you're coming out, or if you ever make the trip out, to scoop them back up after the semester. I just bought some land last fall, up on an island in the St. Lawrence River. So in that general neck of the woods, and it'll still take some time to build something out, but it would, I don't know, there's an excuse, because it's regionally appropriate, that I can have you guys out, and we'll take you out on the boat in the river, and I don't know, run on the island and just enjoy a day or so.
Yeah, well, it'll be his freshman year. I'll be there in August. I'll give you a shout.
Sweet. We should hopefully we'll have a dock, hopefully built by August, so that may actually work.
Sure. Good.
Yeah. Right on, man. All right. Well, until that time, yeah, man, it was really wonderful to connect. So thanks for carving out some time.
Yeah, it was good to catch up.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Talk to you later.
So for all those that hung with us for another round of TC Live, I go long. So thanks for being in the mix. Scott, I was really excited to connect with. He is so instrumental in where the trail and ultra space came from. For those who are watching this maybe posthumously, thanks for taking it in. I forget who I'm on with next week for TC Live. It's somebody, I think I still have Yassine Daboon, maybe the last one in the Route series, but I will look forward to that. So until that time, until I check in with you next weekend, thank you for all the support out there, and I will catch you next round. All right. Till then, see ya.